The late afternoon sun painted the Manhattan skyline in golden hues as Claire Whitmore, clad in a meticulously tailored cream coat, wandered along Fifth Avenue. She clutched her handbag tightly, an unconscious habit she had adopted over the years. At 82, Claire's poised demeanor often camouflaged the years of grief she carried. A widow of 35 years and a mother who hadn't seen her only son in decades. The brisk autumn air filled the city with the scent of roasted chestnuts from street vendors and the faint hum of jazz from a distant corner. Claire turned the corner near Bryant Park when a melody drifted toward her, halting her steps as if her heels had sunk into the pavement. The tune was achingly familiar, a piece Henry, her son, had composed as a teenager. She blinked rapidly, unsure if her mind was playing cruel tricks. Following the sound, she found herself facing a young boy sitting cross-legged on the cold concrete. His violin case lay open in front of him, containing a few scattered coins. The child couldn't have been more than 12, with shaggy brown hair peeking out from beneath a knitted cap and startling green eyes that bore an intensity far beyond his years. Claire's breath hitched. Those eyes reminded her of Henry, as they had been before his disappearance, so vivid, so piercing. The boy's bow danced across the violin strings, rendering the haunting melody with a rawness that tugged at something deep inside her. She stepped closer, her shadow falling across the boy. He stopped mid-note and looked up, startled by her presence. That song! Claire's voice trembled as she clutched her pearls. Where did you learn that song? The boy lowered the violin, glancing around as though assessing whether it was safe to answer. I don't know the name. Just something I learned from someone. Claire's heart raced. She dropped a crisp $20 bill into his case, the rustle of the note silencing the city's distant noise. The boy's eyes widened, but he quickly shook his head. I don't need charity, he muttered, closing the case. It's not charity, Claire insisted, kneeling slightly to meet his gaze. Please, I'd like to know more about you. The boy stood, slinging the violin onto his back. His clothes, a size too big and patched at the elbows, hinted at a life of struggle. He hesitated before answering, Jamie, my name's Jamie. Jamie, Claire repeated, tasting the name as though it were an echo from her past. Do you have family here? Jamie shrugged, his gaze darting between Claire and the crowded street behind her. Not really. The answer tightened a knot in Claire's chest. She extended a hand. Would you let me buy you a meal? Just a meal, Jamie hesitated, his green eyes scanning her face for deceit. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but just this once. As they walked to a nearby diner, Claire couldn't help but steal glances at Jamie. The boy's gait was familiar, his demeanor cautious but not hostile. His violin bumped against his back with each step. Her mind raced with possibilities and questions she wasn't ready to voice. Inside the diner, Jamie sat opposite her, clutching the menu with calloused fingers. His nails were dirtied, but his posture spoke of a quiet dignity. What would you like? Claire asked gently. Anything warm, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. As they waited for their food, Claire leaned forward, unable to contain herself. Jamie, that song, where did you hear it? Jamie's brow furrowed, and he bit his lip. From someone who looked after me a while ago. She said it was special. Do you remember her name? Claire pressed. Jamie hesitated before muttering, Maggie or Margaret, maybe. The room seemed to tilt for Claire. Her hand flew to her mouth as a flood of memories consumed her. Margaret was Henry's middle name, a peculiar choice her late husband had insisted upon in honor of his sister. Margaret, she whispered. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the locket hanging from her neck. Jamie, was this Margaret family to you? Jamie's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Why are you asking? Who are you? Claire struggled for composure. I'm just someone trying to make sense of something that's haunted me for years." Jamie leaned back in his seat, his youthful face masking a lifetime of suspicion and guardedness. "You're weird," he finally said, though there was no venom in his words. The waitress interrupted, placing bowls of steaming soup before them. Jamie grabbed his spoon without hesitation and began eating. Claire, however, barely touched her meal. Her mind was too busy spinning connections and forming questions that she dared not voice yet. As they left the diner, Claire placed a hand on Jamie's shoulder. "Can I see you again?" she asked softly. Jamie shrugged. "Maybe. Depends." And with that, he vanished into the crowd, leaving Claire standing on the sidewalk, clutching the locket as the haunting melody echoed in her mind. Claire Whitmore sat in her elegant but modest Upper East Side apartment, the remnants of her encounter with Jamie playing on a loop in her mind. The faint smell of chamomile tea lingered in the room, a comfort she clung to during restless nights. Her fingers traced the gold locket resting on her chest as she gazed at an old photograph of Henry propped on the mantelpiece. His eyes, so similar to Jamie's, stared back at her, young and filled with dreams. It had been 30 years since Henry's disappearance, a wound that never fully healed. Claire often replayed that final family trip to London, searching for a missed sign, a clue, a way to undo the tragic timeline. Henry had been only 19, a prodigy whose violin compositions garnered praise from renowned maestros. Yet, he had always been a quiet soul, drawn to the complexities of music, but burdened by the weight of expectations. Claire could still hear his laughter echoing in their London townhouse that summer before everything shattered. The day he vanished remained etched in her memory. It began like any other, a breakfast of tea and toast, Henry fiddling with his violin by the window. By evening, he was gone, leaving behind a hastily scribbled note that simply read, "I need to find my own music." Despite exhaustive searches and pleas to the police, Henry seemed to have vanished into thin air. The years that followed were a blur of private investigators, sleepless nights, and growing despair. Claire's husband, Jonathan, once a stalwart of calm, grew distant, their shared grief becoming a wall between them. By the time he passed a decade later, their marriage felt like a relic of another life. Claire poured her energy into philanthropy, funding scholarships for young musicians in Henry's honor, yet the ache persisted, a silent companion she had come to accept as part of her existence. Now, decades later, the haunting melody Jamie played stirred memories long buried. The boy's scruffy appearance, his violin, and the strange familiarity of his gaze, it all felt too coincidental. Yet, Claire hesitated to hope. Her rational mind warned her against chasing ghosts, but her heart, fragile and yearning, whispered otherwise. The morning light seeped through the lace curtains as Claire opened her journal, a ritual she rarely skipped. With deliberate strokes, she recounted the previous day's events, her pen trembling when she wrote Jamie's name. Who was he? How did he know Henry's music? And the name he mentioned, Margaret. It was impossible not to draw connections. Margaret Whitmore had been Claire's late husband's sister, a woman of boundless energy and a defiant spirit. She vanished from their lives long before Henry's birth. Estranged due to family disputes Claire never fully understood. The possibility that Margaret had somehow influenced Jamie's life ignited a new wave of questions. Could she still be alive? Could she have crossed paths with Henry? The thoughts were overwhelming, but Claire refused to let them fester unexamined. Determined, she retrieved a box of mementos from her closet. It had remained unopened for years, containing the last fragments of Henry's life. Inside were photos, sheet music, and a program from his final performance in London. Claire ran her fingers over the pages, lingering on the notes of a composition Henry had titled For the Wanderer. The melody was strikingly similar to what Jamie had played. The ringing of her phone snapped Claire out of her reverie. It was her friend Evelyn, a sharp-witted woman who had been a constant presence through the years. "Claire, you missed our morning walk again," Evelyn chided lightly. "What's going on?" Claire hesitated before responding. "I met a boy yesterday, Evelyn. He played Henry's music on a violin." There was a pause on the line. "Henry's music, are you sure?" "I'd recognize it anywhere," Claire said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. She recounted the encounter, sparing no detail. Evelyn listened patiently, her usual skepticism softened by years of witnessing Claire's heartbreak. "What do you plan to do about it?" Evelyn finally asked. "I don't know yet," Claire admitted. "But I feel like I need to see him again," Evelyn sighed. "Just promise me you'll be careful. You've been through enough." "I will," Claire assured her, though a flicker of doubt lingered. She wasn't sure if she was chasing closure or inviting more pain into her life. The hours passed slowly that day. Claire ventured to the spot where she had first seen Jamie, her heart thudding with a mixture of hope and apprehension. But the corner was empty, the haunting melody replaced by the city's usual cacophony of car horns and chatter. She lingered for a while before returning home, her thoughts as restless as the autumn wind. That evening, as Claire sat by the window with her tea, she allowed herself to whisper a thought that had been circling her mind all day. Could he really be connected to Henry? The question hung in the air, unanswered yet persistent. The following day dawned crisp and bright, yet Claire Whitmore's heart felt weighed down with the uncertainty of her discovery. The streets of Manhattan bustled as usual, but the rhythm of the city did little to calm the disquiet within her. She clutched the strap of her handbag tighter, determination mingling with apprehension. She had resolved to find Jamie again, to delve deeper into the mystery of his connection to Henry's music. By late afternoon, she reached the corner near Bryant Park where she had first encountered him. The air was filled with the scent of roasted peanuts and faint strains of a saxophone played by another street performer. Her eyes scanned the crowded street, hopeful yet cautious. Just as she began to think the search would yield nothing, the faint sound of a violin drifted toward her. Turning sharply, she spotted Jamie seated on the same worn blanket, his violin cradled under his chin. His fingers moved deftly, pulling a melody from the strings that stopped Claire in her tracks. It wasn't Henry's composition this time, but the depth of emotion in Jamie's performance was unmistakable. She approached carefully, not wanting to startle him. When he finally looked up, his expression flickered with recognition, though his guarded demeanor remained intact. "You're back," he muttered, lowering the violin. "Yes, I am," Claire replied, offering a small smile. "I was hoping to see you again." Jamie tilted his head, scrutinizing her as though weighing whether she could be trusted. "Why? Most people just walk by." Claire hesitated, then decided on honesty. "That song you played yesterday, it means a lot to me. My son wrote it." Jamie's brows knitted together. "Your son?" he echoed skeptically. "The woman who taught me that melody, she never mentioned anyone else." Claire's breath caught. "The woman, do you remember her name?" He shrugged, his eyes darting to the busy street. "She called herself Margaret, or something close to that. I didn't ask many questions. She let me stay with her for a while before she passed." The word passed hit Claire like a cold wind. Her mind raced. Margaret Whitmore, could it be? There were too many coincidences to ignore, yet too many uncertainties to place her hope completely in this boy's fragmented story. "Jamie," Claire began carefully, "would you join me for another meal? I'd like to hear more about this woman and how you learned that song." He hesitated, suspicion flickering in his green eyes, but the mention of food softened his stance. I guess, just for a meal. They ended up in a small diner, one of those places with red leather booths and a steady stream of coffee being poured. Claire ordered tea, while Jamie devoured a plate of pancakes with an appetite that spoke of hunger as much as growing boyhood. "So," Claire began, trying to sound conversational, "how long were you with Margaret?" Jamie wiped syrup from his chin with a napkin and shrugged. "A few months, maybe. I don't really keep track of time. She found me sleeping in a bus shelter and told me I could stay if I didn't make trouble." Claire's throat tightened at the image. "Did she talk about her life much?" Jamie frowned, his fork pausing mid-air. "Not really. She mostly just talked about a boy she used to know who never came back." Claire's fingers curled around the edge of her teacup. "What did she say about him?" Jamie seemed to sense her desperation and leaned back slightly, as though retreating from her intensity. "She said he loved music more than anything, that he was lost, but not in the way people think." He hesitated. She never said much else. The knot in Claire's chest tightened. If Margaret had been speaking about Henry, then the idea that he had been lost carried an unbearable weight. "Did she leave anything behind?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Anything personal?" Jamie pulled something from his pocket, a small object wrapped in tissue paper. He hesitated before unwrapping it. "This," he said, placing it on the table. It was a locket, tarnished but still intact. "She told me to keep it safe." Claire's fingers trembled as she reached for it. Inside was a faded photograph of a young man, Henry, unmistakable with his shy smile and untamed curls. The photograph was one Claire had taken herself, weeks before he disappeared. Her vision blurred with tears. "Where did she get this?" she whispered. Jamie shrugged. "Don't know. She didn't talk about herself much." The revelation left Claire reeling. She couldn't understand how the locket had come into Jamie's possession, but it was undeniable proof of a connection between Margaret, Jamie, and Henry. Yet it raised more questions than it answered. How had Henry's life intersected with Margaret's? And what had led him to disappear in the first place? "Thank you for showing me this," Claire said, her voice trembling with sincerity. "It means more than you know." Jamie's wary expression softened slightly. "You're different from most people," he muttered, almost to himself. The waitress interrupted, dropping the bill on their table. As Jamie stood to leave, Claire touched his arm gently. "Jamie, I'd like to help you, if you'll let me." His eyes darted to her hand, then back to her face. "Why? You don't even know me." Claire smiled faintly. "Maybe it's time I try." The walk back to her apartment felt heavier than usual. Claire Whitmore's thoughts churned as she clutched the locket Jamie had reluctantly handed over, her fingers tracing the edges of its worn metal. The discovery was monumental, but with it came the weight of questions she couldn't yet answer. The faint hum of traffic and the muted chatter of pedestrians blurred into a distant murmur as she tried to make sense of the past hours. Jamie had disappeared down a side street, a shadow retreating into the city. She had wanted to press him further, to understand more about the mysterious Margaret and her connection to Henry, but she knew better than to push. Trust, she reminded herself, would come slowly. In her apartment, surrounded by framed photographs and the soft glow of an antique lamp, Claire opened the locket again. Henry's young face stared back at her, the same face she had seen on countless missing person posters decades earlier. The faded photo, though comforting in its familiarity, was also a sharp reminder of her failure to find him all those years ago. By the time the evening deepened, Claire resolved to see Jamie again, not to interrogate him, but to nurture the fragile connection they had established. The boy's wary eyes and guarded demeanor spoke of a life hardened by neglect. And though Claire's questions about Henry loomed large, she couldn't ignore Jamie's vulnerability. She decided she would start by simply being there for him. The next day, she ventured out once more, her resolve steady despite the gnawing uncertainty in her chest. The corner near Bryant Park was empty, as were the neighboring streets. Claire's heart sank as she waited, scanning the crowds for any sign of Jamie, just as she began to doubt she'd find him again. The faint strains of a violin reached her ears. Following the music, she found him perched on the steps of a brownstone building, his bow gliding over the strings with precision. The melody was different this time, melancholic but unfamiliar. She waited until he finished before stepping forward. "You're persistent," Jamie said without looking up, his tone tinged with suspicion. Claire managed a small smile. "I suppose I am." "Would you mind some company?" He shrugged, though the slight relaxation in his shoulders suggested he didn't mind. She sat down carefully, the cold stone steps pressing against her legs. "I wanted to thank you for trusting me yesterday," Claire began. "I know it couldn't have been easy." Jamie set the violin aside, pulling his jacket tighter against the chill. "Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." Claire considered his question. "Because I see someone worth knowing." Jamie scoffed, his eyes darting to the ground. "You don't know anything about me." "You're right," Claire admitted. "But I'd like to." The boy hesitated, torn between his instinct to retreat and a flicker of curiosity. Finally, he muttered, "What's in it for you?" Claire took a deep breath, deciding honesty was the only path forward. "I lost someone very important to me a long time ago. You remind me of him. Your music, your spirit. Maybe it's selfish, but being around you feels like a second chance." Jamie's brow furrowed. "I'm not a replacement for whoever you lost." "I know," Claire said gently. "You're not. You're your own person, and I don't want to take that away from you." For a moment, Jamie seemed to soften, but the wall around him quickly returned. "People always say they want to help," he said bitterly. "Then they disappear when it's inconvenient." Claire's heart ached at his words. "I'm not here to make promises I can't keep," she said quietly. "But I am here now, and I'll stay as long as you'll let me." Jamie didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the violin beside him. Claire let the silence linger, sensing his inner conflict. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible. "The woman who taught me the song, she said something strange once." "What was it?" Claire asked, leaning forward slightly. Jamie hesitated, his fingers tightening on his jacket. "She said there were things people don't want to find, that sometimes it's better to leave the past alone." The words sent a chill through Claire. Was it a warning, or merely the ramblings of a woman who had seen too much sorrow? Either way, the statement unsettled her. Before she could ask more, Jamie stood abruptly, slinging the violin over his shoulder. "I should go," he said, his tone clipped. "Jamie," Claire began, but he shook his head. "I'll see you around," he said over his shoulder, already walking away. Claire remained on the steps long after he vanished, the echoes of his words reverberating in her mind. She had thought finding Jamie would bring her closer to answers, but the boy's mistrust and cryptic revelations only deepened the mystery. As the city lights flickered to life around her, Claire felt the pull of two conflicting desires: to honor Jamie's boundaries and to uncover the truth about Henry. For now, she would have to do both. The air outside Claire Whitmore's apartment had turned brisk, carrying the unmistakable bite of a deepening autumn. She sat by her window, the locket Jamie had given her resting heavily in her palm. The tarnished metal felt like a bridge between two timelines, her life with Henry and the uncertain present. The photograph inside, though faded, was unmistakable. It was a moment frozen in time, just weeks before he disappeared. Now, that same photograph, in Jamie's possession, demanded answers. Claire had spent the past day replaying Jamie's words, her mind circling around Margaret's cryptic message. There are things people don't want to find. What could that possibly mean? And why had Margaret, a woman Claire had not seen or heard from in decades, held onto this locket, only for it to end up with Jamie? Determined to unravel the threads of the mystery, Claire ventured back to Jamie's usual spot the next afternoon. She found him leaning against the side of a building, his violin case at his feet. He seemed engrossed in tuning the instrument, but his eyes flicked up briefly, registering her presence before returning to the strings. "You're back," he said without enthusiasm. Claire approached cautiously, her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. "I didn't mean to intrude," she began, her tone gentle. "I just had more questions." Jamie let out a soft sigh, setting the violin down with deliberate care. "Questions about Margaret, right? Or about the boy she used to talk about?" Claire nodded, hesitating for a moment. "Both, I suppose." "Jamie, the photograph in the locket, did she ever say where she got it?" Jamie shrugged, the movement casual but guarded. "Not really. She didn't talk much about herself, just told stories sometimes. She always said she was protecting the boy from something." Claire's pulse quickened. "Did she ever say what she was protecting him from?" "No," Jamie replied, his green eyes narrowing slightly. "But she was always nervous, like someone might come looking for her." The weight of Jamie's words settled heavily on Claire. Margaret, her estranged sister-in-law, had lived in the shadows, and somehow Henry had been caught in her orbit. But why? What had driven him to leave, and what had he been running from? "Jamie," Claire said after a pause, her voice trembling slightly, "I want to help you, but I also think you can help me. Together, maybe we can figure out what happened to my son." Jamie tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Why does it matter so much now? It's been, 30 years? The question stung, but Claire couldn't fault him for asking. She let out a shaky breath. "Because losing someone doesn't get easier with time, and because I think you're connected to this in ways neither of us fully understands." Jamie seemed to consider her words, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his jacket. After a long silence, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn object, a locket identical to the one Claire held. "I wasn't going to show you this," he admitted, his voice low. "But if you're serious about finding answers, maybe this will help." Claire's breath caught as Jamie handed her the second locket. She opened it with trembling hands, revealing another photograph, this time of a young woman, her features sharp and familiar. It was Margaret, her hair pulled back in the same style Claire remembered from their fleeting encounters decades ago. Beneath the photograph was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. She unfolded it carefully, the words scrawled in hurried handwriting, "Keep this safe. If they find me, they'll find him." The cryptic note sent a chill down Claire's spine. "Jamie, did Margaret ever talk about being in danger?" Jamie hesitated, his gaze flickering to the ground. "Once or twice, she didn't trust people. She said something about the family being dangerous. I thought she was just paranoid." Claire's knees felt weak as the implications sank in. The Whitmore family, once a pillar of high society, had not been without its shadows. Jonathan's father had been a domineering figure, and the family's wealth came with its fair share of secrets. Could Margaret have been fleeing something, or someone, connected to the family's past? The locket in Claire's hand seemed to grow heavier. "Jamie, I don't know what this means yet, but I believe you were meant to find me. There's something here, something we need to uncover." Jamie looked at her skeptically, his defenses still intact but wavering. "What if we don't like what we find?" Claire met his gaze, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Then we face it together." For the first time, Jamie's posture softened. He gave a small nod, as if granting her access to the guarded corners of his life. "All right," he said quietly. "But no promises." As they parted ways, Claire's grip on the two lockets tightened. The city around her felt colder, the streets more shadowed, as though the answers she sought were shrouded in the same fog that had obscured Henry's disappearance all those years ago. She knew, however, that the journey had only just begun. The morning sunlight filtered softly through Claire Whitmore's lace curtains as she stared at the two lockets on her dining table. The room, usually a haven of warmth with its antique furnishings and faded floral wallpaper, felt unusually heavy. Each locket held a piece of a puzzle that Claire was determined to solve, and Jamie, with his guarded eyes and reluctant trust, was now as much a part of this journey as she was. After their last conversation, Claire felt a deeper sense of responsibility for Jamie. He was more than just a link to Henry. He was a boy navigating a harsh world with no real guidance. She couldn't simply focus on her quest for answers and ignore the quiet desperation that clung to him. She picked up her phone and dialed Evelyn, her oldest friend, whose sharp wit often helped Claire cut through her own hesitation. Evelyn picked up on the second ring. "Claire, what is it now? Did you find another clue?" Evelyn's voice was laced with affection but tinged with skepticism. Claire hesitated. "It's about Jamie. He's alone, Evelyn, living on the streets. I can't just let that be." There was a pause on the other end. "Claire, you've always had a heart too big for this world, but are you sure taking in a street kid is complicated?" "I know," Claire admitted, her voice soft, "but he reminds me of Henry, not just in the way he looks, but in his music, his spirit. I can't ignore that." Evelyn sighed. "All right, but just be careful. These things have a way of becoming more than you bargained for." "I will," Claire promised, though the weight of what lay ahead settled firmly on her shoulders. Later that afternoon, Claire returned to the corner near Bryant Park. Jamie was there, as she had hoped, his violin case open at his feet. The melody he played was lighter today, almost hopeful, though it carried an undercurrent of melancholy that seemed to echo in his very posture. When he noticed her, he paused mid-note, lowering the violin. "You're back," he said, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "I said I would be," Claire replied, stepping closer. "How about some lunch? My treat." Jamie hesitated, his wariness still intact but slowly eroding. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, but I picked the place." The diner Jamie chose was a small, unassuming spot tucked between two towering office buildings. The booths were patched with duct tape, and the menu was handwritten on a chalkboard, but Jamie seemed at ease here, like it was a refuge from the bustling world outside. As they ate, Claire decided to shift the focus away from her questions about Henry and Margaret. She wanted to know more about Jamie, his life, his dreams, and the burdens he carried. "How long have you been playing the violin?" she asked, watching as he devoured a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. "Couple of years," Jamie replied, his tone casual. "I found it in a thrift store. It was beat up, but it worked. Margaret taught me a few things, and I just kept going." Claire's heart ached at the thought of Jamie teaching himself, piecing together melodies in solitude. "You have a gift," she said earnestly. "Have you ever thought about studying music formally?" Jamie let out a soft laugh, though it lacked humor. "Studying? Lady, I can't even afford a proper meal half the time." Claire placed her teacup down, her resolve firming. "What if I helped you? I could enroll you in lessons, get you the tools you need." Jamie's expression darkened, and he leaned back in the booth. Why are you doing this? What's in it for you? It's not about me, Claire said gently. You have a chance to do something extraordinary with your talent. I just want to see you succeed. Jamie looked away, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of the table. People have said that before, he muttered. It never lasts. Claire reached across the table, her hand hovering near his. Then let me prove I'm different. He didn't pull away, but his guarded expression remained. Maybe, he said finally, but don't expect me to trust you overnight. I don't, Claire replied, her voice steady. Trust takes time. And I have time. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and for the first time, Claire caught glimpses of the boy behind the walls. Jamie talked about the songs he'd learned from watching street performers, his favorite places to play, and the people who sometimes stopped to listen. He was a boy of contradictions, hardened by life's cruelties, but still yearning for connection. When they parted ways, Claire felt a flicker of hope. Jamie wasn't ready to fully open up, but he had let her in, if only a little. As she walked home, her mind turned over the pieces of the puzzle she now held. Margaret's cryptic warnings, the photograph of Henry, and Jamie's uncanny connection to them all. Each thread seemed to pull her closer to a truth she both longed for and feared. Back in her apartment, she placed the 2 lockets on her mantel, their presence a constant reminder of the journey ahead. For the first time in years, Claire felt a sense of purpose beyond her grief. Jamie wasn't just a boy with a violin. He was a lifeline, tethering her to a past she couldn't let go of, and a future she was only beginning to imagine. The following week brought Claire Whitmore a mix of tentative progress and unexpected setbacks. Jamie had begun meeting her regularly, but the boy's walls remained firmly in place, his trust inching forward at an agonizingly slow pace. Claire, too, struggled with the delicate balance between helping Jamie and respecting the boundaries he fiercely guarded. The locket and its cryptic note sat in the back of her mind, an unsolved riddle that tied Jamie to her son, Henry, in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. One afternoon, as they sat together in the same diner Jamie favored, Claire broached the subject of his living situation. His clothes were threadbare, his shoes held together by tape, and the dark shadows under his eyes betrayed the sleeplessness of nights spent in unsafe corners of the city. Jamie, she began cautiously, stirring her tea. Have you ever thought about staying somewhere more permanent, somewhere safe? Jamie stiffened, his fork pausing mid-air. I'm fine where I am. Are you? Claire pressed gently. You deserve better than this. Jamie's expression darkened. People always say that, but they don't stick around. I've learned to take care of myself. I'm not going anywhere, Claire said firmly, her voice steady despite the surge of emotion tightening her throat. But you don't have to believe me right now. Just think about it. Jamie didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the window. The boy's silence spoke volumes, and Claire knew better than to push further. A few days later, Claire decided to take another step. She contacted a local music academy where she had once donated funds for scholarships. She hoped to arrange lessons for Jamie, knowing how transformative music had been for Henry. But when she shared the idea with Jamie, his reaction was not what she had anticipated. You want me to go to some fancy school? Jamie scoffed, his tone laced with incredulity. Why? So I can pretend I belong with people like you? Claire blinked, startled by the bitterness in his voice. Jamie, it's not about belonging, it's about giving you the tools to grow your talent. Jamie stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tiled floor. I don't need your charity. It's not charity, Claire insisted, keeping her voice calm despite the tension crackling between them. It's an opportunity. For what? To end up like your son. Jamie's words were sharp, but the instant they left his mouth, his expression crumbled. I didn't mean... Claire raised a hand, stopping him. Her heart ached at the unintended blow, but she saw the fear behind his anger, the vulnerability he desperately tried to hide. "It's all right," she said softly. "I know this isn't easy for you." Jamie hesitated, his fists clenched at his sides. Finally, he muttered, "I just don't want to be something you fix." "You're not something to fix," Claire said gently. "You're someone to care for." Jamie didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked out of the diner, leaving Claire sitting alone at the table. Her eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them away, refusing to let despair take hold. She would give Jamie space, but she wouldn't give up. The next morning, a letter arrived in Claire's mailbox. At first, she thought it was a bill or a piece of junk mail, but the return address made her pause. It was from the DNA testing lab she had contacted weeks ago, shortly after meeting Jamie. Her heart raced as she opened the envelope, the crisp paper trembling in her hands. The results were inconclusive. Claire read the report twice, her chest tightening with every line. While there were markers suggesting a potential familial connection, the data was insufficient to confirm anything definitively. She sank into her armchair, the weight of disappointment pressing down on her. For hours she sat there, the letter crumpled in her lap. The DNA test had been her glimmer of hope, a way to make sense of the tangled threads connecting her to Jamie. Now, she was left with more uncertainty than ever. Later that evening, as she walked through the park where Jamie sometimes played, she found herself scanning the crowd for him. Her footsteps slowed when she saw him sitting on a bench, his violin case closed beside him. His shoulders were hunched, his head bowed, and for the first time, he looked small. Not the streetwise boy who held the world at arm's length, but a child burdened by a life far heavier than he should have to bear. Claire approached slowly, sitting down beside him without a word. For a while, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them like a fragile bridge. "I'm sorry," Jamie said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, "for what I said before." Claire placed a hand over his, her touch light but steady. "It's all right. I know you didn't mean it." Jamie glanced at her, his green eyes shimmering with unspoken emotions. "I just don't know how to trust people." "You don't have to figure it out all at once," Claire said. "We'll take it one step at a time." Jamie nodded, the faintest hint of a smile crossing his face. It was a small moment, but for Claire it was enough. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was willing to walk it, with Jamie by her side. The following week unfolded with a surprising mix of progress and frustration. Claire Whitmore found herself oscillating between hope and doubt as she pieced together the fragments of Jamie's past and her own painful memories of Henry. The inconclusive DNA results sat in a folder on her desk, a reminder of how little certainty she truly had. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the cusp of uncovering something significant. Claire realized she needed help, someone who could look into Jamie's background, Margaret's life, and the connections that bound them all together. She picked up the phone and dialed the number of her old friend, Thomas Ridley, a retired private investigator who had worked on Henry's case decades ago. His gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Claire," he said warmly, though there was an undercurrent of concern in his tone. "It's been years. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Claire hesitated for a moment. "Thomas, I need your expertise again." "It's about Henry." The line went silent before Thomas spoke again, his voice measured. "You think there's something new after all this time?" "I do," Claire said, her conviction strengthening. "But it's not just about Henry. There's a boy, Jamie. I think he might be connected to everything." Thomas listened as Claire explained the events of the past few weeks, from meeting Jamie to discovering the two lockets and the cryptic note. By the time she finished, Her heart was pounding, but Thomas's calm response steadied her. "I'll help you," he said firmly. "Send me everything you have, the photographs, the note, anything else, and I'll start digging." Relief washed over Claire as she hung up. Thomas had been a relentless investigator when Henry disappeared. And though his efforts hadn't led to answers then, Claire trusted his instincts. She compiled the documents and mailed them that afternoon, her hope rekindled by the prospect of a fresh perspective. Meanwhile, her bond with Jamie continued to evolve. They met regularly, and though he remained guarded, his defenses seemed to soften with each passing day. Claire brought him small comforts, a warm coat, a sturdy pair of shoes, but she knew material gifts weren't enough. She focused on listening, on being present, and slowly, Jamie began sharing snippets of his life. "I stayed with Margaret for a few months," he said one evening as they walked through the park. "She was kind, but she always seemed scared, like she was waiting for something bad to happen." Claire's brow furrowed. "Did she ever say why she was afraid?" Jamie shook his head. "Not really. She just said people couldn't be trusted." The words resonated deeply with Claire. Margaret's fear, Henry's disappearance, and Jamie's distrust all seemed to point to a shadowy force she couldn't yet name. A few days later, Thomas called with his first update. "Claire, I've found something," he said, his voice tinged with urgency. "Margaret Whitmore didn't just vanish from your family's life. She was listed in records under an alias after she left New York. It seems she was involved in several foster care cases over the years." Claire's grip tightened on the phone. "What does that mean?" "I'm not sure yet," Thomas admitted, "but one of the names in the records matches a shelter Jamie stayed at years ago. It's not a coincidence." The revelation sent Claire's mind racing. Margaret's presence in Jamie's life seemed more deliberate than she had imagined. "Keep looking, Thomas," she urged. "There has to be more." The next day, Claire shared the news with Jamie, carefully gauging his reaction. He listened intently, his expression inscrutable, but Claire noticed a flicker of something in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or a glimmer of hope. "So, she was trying to help kids like me," Jamie said quietly. "But why?" "I don't know yet," Claire admitted, "but we'll figure it out." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at Claire's door. She opened it to find Thomas standing there, holding a manila folder. His presence startled her. Thomas rarely visited unannounced. "I needed to show you this in person," he said, stepping inside. He placed the folder on the dining table and opened it, revealing a stack of documents and photographs. "This is Eleanor," Thomas said, pointing to an image of a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Margaret. "She's Margaret's sister, and she disappeared from your family's history around the same time." Claire stared at the photograph, her mind struggling to process the connection. "Eleanor. I remember hearing about her, but I never knew her." "My husband never talked about her," Thomas nodded. "She had a falling out with your husband's father. From what I've gathered, she was involved in something your family didn't approve of." "What does this have to do with Jamie?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. "I think Eleanor might have raised Jamie for a time," Thomas said. "And she may have known where Henry was, or still is." The words hit Claire like a tidal wave. For the first time, the pieces of the puzzle seemed to align. Eleanor, Margaret, Jamie, and Henry were all connected in ways she had never imagined. Jamie, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "So this Eleanor, she might know who I am." "She might," Thomas said, "but finding her won't be easy. She's been off the grid for years." As the weight of the revelation settled over the room, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was daunting, but for the first time, she felt they were moving closer to the truth. The days following Thomas's revelations felt like a whirlwind, and yet for Jamie, it was as if time had slowed to an unbearable crawl. The idea that someone, a stranger named Eleanor, might hold the answers to his past should have filled him with hope, but instead it left him restless and uneasy. He didn't trust the sudden flood of attention. After years of being overlooked and dismissed, this newfound interest in his life felt almost too much to bear. Claire, meanwhile, tried to tread lightly, aware that Jamie's patience was wearing thin. She had seen the tension in his shoulders during Thomas's explanation, the way he avoided eye contact and fiddled with the zipper on his jacket. She suspected he felt as though his life was being examined under a microscope, and she worried he might retreat entirely if pushed too hard. "Jamie," she said one afternoon as they walked through Central Park, the crisp autumn leaves crunching underfoot. "I know this is a lot to take in." "That's one way to put it," Jamie muttered, shoving his hands into his pockets. "It's not like I asked for any of this." Claire stopped, turning to face him. "I know you didn't, and I don't want you to feel like you're being forced into anything. But I think we're on the verge of something important, something that could help you." Jamie kicked at a pile of leaves, his expression hardening. "What if I don't want their help? What if I don't care about some random woman who might know who I am?" The outburst startled Claire, but she kept her voice calm. "I think you care more than you're willing to admit. And that's okay. It's okay to be scared." "I'm not scared," Jamie snapped, though the crack in his voice betrayed him. He turned and started walking faster, leaving Claire struggling to keep up. By the time they reached the edge of the park, Jamie had fallen into a brooding silence. Claire wanted to comfort him, to reassure him that she wasn't going anywhere, but she knew words alone wouldn't be enough. She decided to give him space, hoping he would come back to her when he was ready. That evening, as Jamie wandered the streets, his mind churned with conflicting emotions. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life was spiraling out of his control. For years, he had survived on his own terms, relying on no one but himself. Now, Claire and Thomas were dragging him into a world he didn't understand, a world filled with promises that felt too fragile to believe. He found himself outside the small shelter where he sometimes slept, staring at the peeling paint on the door. The other kids there called him the Violin Boy, a title that set him apart but also made him a target. He wasn't in the mood to fend off their taunts tonight, so he turned and headed for the bus stop instead. Sitting on the bench, his violin case at his feet, Jamie felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. The city around him buzzed with its usual chaos, but he felt entirely alone. He pulled out the second locket, the one that had belonged to Margaret, and turned it over in his hands. "What do you want from me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of traffic. The locket, of course, offered no answers, only the same faded photograph and cryptic note that had haunted him for weeks. Suddenly, a group of teenagers passed by, their laughter echoing in the chilly night air. One of them noticed Jamie and nudged his friend, pointing at the violin case. "Hey, Mozart!" the boy called out mockingly. "Play us a sad song." Jamie tensed, his grip tightening on the locket. He ignored them, but the boys weren't deterred. They circled him like vultures, their taunts growing louder. "What's in the case?" one of them asked, reaching for it. "Don't touch that," Jamie snapped, his voice sharp and angry. The boy smirked, pulling his hand back but not retreating. "Relax, Mozart, just messing with you." The encounter ended without escalation, but it left Jamie shaken. He realized how vulnerable he was, how fragile his sense of safety had become. As the teenagers walked away, their laughter fading into the distance, Jamie slumped against the bench, the fight draining out of him. The next morning, Claire found him back at his usual spot near Bryant Park, his face pale and his eyes hollow. She sat beside him without a word, offering a thermos of hot chocolate and a bag of pastries. He took them reluctantly, his hands trembling slightly as he unwrapped the food. "I'm sorry," Jamie said after a long silence, his voice barely above a whisper, "for snapping at you yesterday." "You don't have to apologize," Claire said gently. "I know this is a lot, but you don't have to carry it alone, Jamie." "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted, his voice breaking. "What if we find out something I don't want to know?" Claire reached out, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Whatever we find, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this." For the first time in days, Jamie looked at her, his green eyes filled with uncertainty, but also a flicker of trust. It was a small step, but Claire knew it was enough for now. Together, they would keep moving forward, one fragile moment at a time. The first chill of winter had crept into the air, painting the city with a quiet grayness that mirrored Claire Whitmore's mood. She sat in her apartment, the photograph of Henry resting beside the two lockets on the table in front of her. Her hands clutched a steaming cup of tea, but its warmth did little to soothe the storm of emotions swirling inside her. The revelations of the past weeks had left her both closer to the truth and further from peace than she had been in decades. Jamie's crisis had shaken her deeply. She understood his fears. What if the answers they uncovered only deepened his pain? But Claire also felt the weight of her own uncertainty. Eleanor's connection to Margaret as Jamie and Henry was undeniable, yet tracing her seemed like chasing a ghost. Thomas had uncovered a lead, but it came at a cost, an international search that would require significant resources. Claire thought about the antique heirloom on her mantel, a gilded clock passed down through the Whitmore family for generations. It had been appraised years ago at a staggering value, one that could easily fund the search for Eleanor. Selling it, however, would sever one of the few remaining ties to her late husband and the life they had built together. She rose from her chair and approached the clock, her fingertips brushing against the intricate carvings. Its chimes had marked countless moments in her family's life: birthdays, anniversaries, quiet evenings when Henry's music filled the house. Parting with it felt like losing a piece of her history, but the thought of helping Jamie and perhaps finding Henry outweighed the sentimental pull. The decision was made. The following morning, Claire took the clock to an auction house downtown. The appraiser, a kind man in his 50s, marveled at its craftsmanship. "It's a remarkable piece," he said, jotting notes on a clipboard. "You'll fetch a substantial amount." Claire nodded, her face composed even as her heart ached. "I'm not selling it for the money," she explained quietly. "It's for something more important." That evening, she met Jamie in the diner where they often talked. He looked better than he had days before. The exhaustion in his eyes had eased, though he still carried himself with the wary air of someone waiting for the ground beneath him to shift. "Why do you want to meet here?" Jamie asked, sliding into the booth across from her. Claire hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I've made arrangements to start a search for Eleanor." Jamie's eyes widened slightly, but his expression remained guarded. "How?" "I sold something valuable to me," she said simply. "It was an heirloom, something from my family. The money will cover the costs." Jamie frowned, his gaze dropping to the table. "You didn't have to do that. I didn't ask you to." "I know," Claire replied, her voice steady. "But this isn't just about you, Jamie. It's about finding the truth for both of us." Jamie shifted uncomfortably, clearly grappling with her words. "What if it doesn't work? What if we don't find her, or she doesn't want to be found?" Claire reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on his. "Then at least we'll know we tried. And no matter what we find, you won't be alone." For a moment, Jamie didn't speak. Then he looked up, his green eyes meeting hers. "I don't get it," he said softly. "Why do you care so much?" Claire's heart ached at the question, but she answered honestly. "Because I see myself in you, and I see Henry. You remind me of the person I've spent 30 years searching for." Jamie swallowed hard, his tough exterior cracking just slightly. "I'm not him," he murmured. "No," Claire agreed, her voice filled with warmth. "You're not, but that doesn't make you any less important to me." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics as the evening wore on, but the weight of their shared journey lingered. Jamie's walls hadn't fallen completely, but Claire felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time, he seemed to accept that she wasn't going to abandon him. The following week, Thomas called with news. "Claire, I've located Eleanor, or at least someone who knows where she might be. It's an old contact of hers in England." Claire's breath caught. "England?" "Yes," Thomas confirmed. "It's not definitive, but it's the strongest lead we've had." The news brought a mix of excitement and trepidation. Claire relayed the update to Jamie, who listened intently but remained cautious. "So what now?" he asked. "We go," Claire said firmly. "If you're ready." Jamie hesitated before nodding. "All right," he said, "but only if you promise not to sell anything else for me." Claire smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Deal." As she walked home that evening, Claire allowed herself a moment of reflection. The path ahead was uncertain, and the sacrifices she had made weighed heavily on her. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was moving towards something real, something that could heal not just her own wounds, but Jamie's as well. The heirloom was gone, but in its place, she had found a sense of purpose, far more valuable. The morning of their departure to England arrived with an eerie stillness. Claire Whitmore, ever meticulous, had packed her suitcase the night before. She double-checked her documents and the envelope of photographs, letters and notes Thomas had compiled. Each item represented a thread of her fractured history, one that seemed to entwine with Jamie's in ways neither of them fully understood. Jamie stood by the taxi outside her apartment, his violin case slung over his shoulder and a weathered backpack hanging from one arm. His expression was unreadable, though Claire could sense his unease. She offered him a reassuring smile as she climbed into the car, but he merely nodded, his gaze fixed on the city disappearing behind them. The flight to London was long and quiet. Claire tried to distract herself with a book, but her thoughts kept drifting to the journey ahead. Jamie, seated beside her, alternated between staring out the window and dozing fitfully. When they landed, the grey skies above Heathrow seemed to reflect the uncertainty that weighed on them both. Thomas had arranged for them to meet an old contact of Eleanor's, a woman named Vivienne, who had been a social worker during the years Eleanor lived in England. As their cab wound through the narrow streets of Camden, Claire felt her pulse quicken. Each turn brought them closer to a past she wasn't sure she was ready to confront. Vivienne's flat was small but tidy, tucked into a row of modest homes. The woman who greeted them at the door was in her 70s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She ushered them into her living room, offering tea and biscuits as though they were old friends rather than strangers on a mission. "You're here about Eleanor," Vivienne said once they were seated. Her voice carried the clipped cadence of someone accustomed to delivering hard truths. "I haven't seen her in years, but I can tell you what I remember." Claire leaned forward, clutching her teacup. "Anything you can tell us would be helpful." Vivienne nodded, her gaze turning inward as she sifted through her memories. "Eleanor was a complicated woman," she began, "fiercely protective of the children she cared for, but always looking over her shoulder. She never said much about her past, but it was clear she was running from something, or someone. Jamie, who had been sitting quietly beside Claire, finally spoke. Did she ever talk about a boy? Someone she was hiding?" Vivienne's eyes flickered with recognition. "Yes," she said slowly. "She mentioned a boy once. I assumed he was a child from her past, maybe someone she couldn't save. But now I wonder." Claire's heart pounded. "What did she say about him?" "Not much," Vivienne admitted, "only that he was special and that she'd do anything to keep him safe." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Claire's mind raced. Was the boy Henry? And if so, had Eleanor been protecting him or keeping him hidden? Vivian rose and disappeared into another room, returning moments later with a small wooden box. She placed it on the table, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it. Inside were a stack of letters, their edges yellowed with age. "These are from Eleanor," Vivian explained. "She sent them to me sporadically after she left London. I haven't read them in years, but maybe they'll help." Claire's hands shook as she reached for the letters, her eyes scanning the faded handwriting. One in particular caught her attention. Dated nearly 20 years ago, it read, "Vivienne, I'm safe for now, but the past has a way of catching up to you. The boy is my priority, as he always has been. If you hear anything at all, about someone looking for me, let me know. I can't let them find him." Claire passed the letter to Jamie, who read it with a furrowed brow. "The boy," he murmured. "She was talking about me, wasn't she?" "Maybe," Claire said carefully, "but we don't know for certain." Jamie looked away, his jaw tightening. "It doesn't make sense. If she was protecting me, why didn't she just tell me the truth?" "Maybe she thought you were safer not knowing," Vivian suggested. "Eleanor believed in secrets, sometimes to her own detriment." The visit left Claire and Jamie with more questions than answers, but as they stepped out into the cold London air, Claire felt a glimmer of hope. The letters were a tangible connection to Eleanor, a woman who seemed to hold the key to their shared past. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, Claire knew they were closer than ever to the truth. Back at their hotel, Claire spread the letters out on the desk, poring over each one for clues. Jamie sat on the edge of his bed, the violin resting across his lap as he absent-mindedly plucked the strings. The tension between them had eased slightly, but Claire could sense the storm brewing inside him. "What if we don't find her?" Jamie asked suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. Claire looked up, meeting his gaze. "Then we keep looking," she said firmly, "because we're not just searching for her, Jamie. We're searching for you, for who you are and who you might become." Jamie didn't respond, but the faintest flicker of a smile crossed his face. It was a small moment, but in the midst of their journey, it felt like a victory. The following morning, the streets of London awoke beneath a canopy of mist, as if the city itself was reluctant to reveal its secrets. Claire Whitmore stood at the hotel room window, staring at the bustling world outside while sipping tea. The letters Vivian had given her were spread out on the desk, their faded words offering tantalizing fragments of Eleanor's life, yet no definitive answers. She felt a sense of urgency pressing down on her. Time wasn't infinite, not for her, and certainly not for Jamie, who had already endured more than his fair share of waiting. Jamie sat on the edge of his bed, tying the laces of his worn sneakers. He seemed quieter than usual, his movements deliberate, as though he were bracing himself for something he couldn't quite name. "So, what's the plan today?" he asked without looking up. Claire hesitated. "I think we need to follow up on Vivian's suggestion. She mentioned a woman Eleanor was close to, a family friend named Sylvia." Jamie nodded, though his expression remained guarded. "Do you think this Sylvia will actually know anything?" "It's worth a try," Claire replied. "We've come this far. Every piece of the puzzle matters." They hailed a cab and made their way to Sylvia's address, a modest flat on the outskirts of London. The building was old but well kept, its brick facade softened by creeping ivy. Claire felt a flicker of hope as they knocked on the door. The woman who answered was in her late 60s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that immediately narrowed with suspicion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice clipped. Claire stepped forward, her hands clasped nervously. "Are you Sylvia? Sylvia Hart?" The woman nodded cautiously. "Who's asking?" "My name is Claire Whitmore." she began, her tone gentle but firm. "This is Jamie. We're looking for information about Eleanor Whitmore." Sylvia's expression shifted at the mention of Eleanor's name. She glanced at Jamie, her eyes lingering on his face with a flicker of recognition. "You'd better come in," she said finally, stepping aside to let them through. The flat was small but cozy, filled with books and photographs that gave the space a sense of lived-in warmth. Sylvia gestured for them to sit on the worn sofa before settling into an armchair across from them. "Eleanor," she said, as though testing the name on her tongue. "I haven't heard anyone speak of her in years. What do you want with her?" "She's important to both of us," Claire said, choosing her words carefully. "We believe she might hold the key to understanding Jamie's past and my son's disappearance." Sylvia's eyes flickered with something unreadable, and she sighed deeply. "Eleanor was a complicated woman," she said. "She carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, always worrying about things no one else could see." "Did she ever talk about a boy she was protecting?" Jamie asked, his voice sharper than Claire had anticipated. Sylvia looked at him closely. "She didn't need to talk about him. It was clear she would do anything for that boy. Her whole life revolved around keeping him safe." "Do you know why?" Claire pressed. "What was she so afraid of?" Sylvia hesitated, then rose and crossed the room to retrieve a small tin box from a bookshelf. She opened it and pulled out a photograph, handing it to Claire. The picture showed a much younger Eleanor, standing beside a man Claire recognized instantly, Jonathan Whitmore, her late husband. "This was taken before she disappeared," Sylvia explained. "Jonathan came to see her, demanding something. I don't know what it was, but it terrified her." Claire's heart sank as she stared at the photo. Jonathan's face, so familiar, yet distant, carried a sternness she hadn't noticed before. "I never knew they met after she left New York," she murmured. "They did," Sylvia confirmed, "and whatever happened during that meeting changed everything. She told me she had to disappear for the boy's sake." Jamie's hands clenched into fists on his lap. "If she was so worried about protecting me, why didn't she just tell me the truth?" "Eleanor believed that the less you knew, the safer you'd be," Sylvia said gently. "She wasn't perfect, but she loved you fiercely. She just didn't know how to show it." The room fell into a heavy silence as Claire and Jamie absorbed the weight of Sylvia's words. Claire's mind raced with questions about Jonathan's role in Eleanor's disappearance and what it might mean for Henry's fate. She felt a pang of guilt for not seeing the shadows in her husband's life, the secrets he had kept from her even in their closest moments. Sylvia reached out and placed a hand on Jamie's shoulder. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "Eleanor never stopped believing in you. She thought you were destined for something great." Jamie's eyes glistened, though he quickly looked away. "That doesn't make any of this easier." "I know," Sylvia replied, "but maybe it'll help you understand why she did what she did." As they left the flat, Claire felt a new urgency building within her. The threads connecting Eleanor, Jonathan, and Henry were tightening, and the truth felt closer than ever. But with each revelation came the undeniable sense that the answers they sought would come at a cost. Jamie walked beside her in silence, his shoulders hunched against the cold. For the first time, Claire reached out and linked her arm through his, offering him a quiet solidarity she hoped he could feel. "We'll figure this out," she said softly. "No matter what it takes." Jamie didn't reply, but he didn't pull away either. It was enough. For now, the streets of London seemed to grow narrower as Claire Whitmore and Jamie approached the next address Thomas had provided, a small, inconspicuous building nestled in a maze of alleyways near King's Cross. The rain had started earlier that morning, soaking the city in a persistent drizzle that dampened everything except Claire's resolve. She clutched her umbrella tightly as she and Jamie exchanged a look. His face was a mix of apprehension and determination, the echoes of Sylvia's revelations still fresh in their minds. Thomas had called just hours ago, urging them to visit the location without delay. "It's a long shot," he had warned, "but it's the only lead we've got. Someone here may have been in contact with Eleanor, or at least know where she went after leaving Sylvia." The air inside the building was musty, heavy with the scent of damp wood and aged paper. A bell jingled softly as they stepped through the door, announcing their arrival to the lone occupant, a wiry man in his 60s who sat hunched over a desk covered in stacks of papers and file boxes. His glasses perched precariously on his nose as he looked up, his expression skeptical. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. Claire stepped forward, her voice steady. "We're looking for someone who may have known Eleanor Whitmore. We were told you might have records or information." The man's brows furrowed as he adjusted his glasses. "Eleanor Whitmore," he repeated slowly. "That's not a name I've heard in years." Claire's heart leapt. "So you did know her?" "I knew of her," he corrected. "She was involved with the refugee network here in London. A lot of people used aliases back then, trying to stay out of sight. If she passed through, there might be something in the files." He gestured toward a towering cabinet in the corner of the room, its drawers labeled with faded tape. "You're welcome to look, but it's a needle in a haystack. We don't exactly keep a tidy system." Jamie moved first, his youthful energy propelling him toward the cabinet. He began rifling through the folders, his fingers swift but careful. Claire joined him, her hands trembling slightly as she sifted through documents yellowed with age. After what felt like an eternity, Jamie froze, a folder clutched in his hands. "I think I found something," he said, his voice low but urgent. Claire moved to his side, her eyes scanning the papers he held. One was a registration form from the refuge, filled out in Eleanor's looping handwriting. Next to dependent's name was a single word, James. Jamie's breath caught. "That's me," he whispered, the realization hitting him like a wave. She really was protecting me. Claire placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, but the man at the desk interrupted their moment. "If you found her name, there might be notes in the incident log," he offered, rising from his chair and moving to a smaller filing box. He flipped through the pages with practiced efficiency before pulling out a sheet. "Here," he said, handing it to Claire. "An entry from about 15 years ago. Looks like there was a disturbance. Someone came looking for her. A man." Claire's stomach churned as she read the description. Though no name was listed, the details matched Jonathan Whitmore. The tall stature, the sharp features, the commanding presence, it was unmistakable. "It was him," she murmured, the weight of her husband's hidden life pressing down on her. "Jonathan," Jamie frowned. "Why would your husband come after her? What did he want?" "I don't know," Claire admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "But whatever it was, it drove her into hiding and took Henry with her." The man at the desk cleared his throat. "If she left here in a hurry, there's a chance she reached out to the other shelters. They kept track of movements back then, tried to keep people safe." He handed Claire another piece of paper, this one bearing an address in the countryside. "This was a safe house she mentioned once. It's remote, and few people knew about it. If she's still alive, or if she left anything behind, it might be there." Claire and Jamie exchanged a glance, their shared determination solidifying in that moment. "Thank you," Claire said, her voice resolute. "We'll go." The journey to the countryside was fraught with tension. The rain followed them as their train sped away from the city, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels offering little solace. Jamie remained quiet, staring out the window as fields and hedgerows blurred past. Claire reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Whatever we find," she said softly, "we'll face it together." Jamie didn't respond immediately, but after a moment, he turned to her, his green eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "I just want answers," he said, "even if they're not what I want to hear." Claire nodded, her own emotions mirroring his. The closer they came to the truth, the heavier the weight of it felt, but they were in this together, bound by a shared need to uncover the past and make sense of the present. As the train pulled into the small station near their destination, Claire felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were running out of time to unravel the secrets that had haunted them both for so long. The countryside stretched wide and silent, broken only by the distant hum of a passing car and the rhythmic crunch of gravel beneath Claire Whitmore's boots. She and Jamie followed the narrow path leading to the address they'd been given, their breaths visible in the crisp winter air. The rain from earlier had subsided, leaving behind a dampness that clung to the trees and hedges surrounding them. The house came into view, a dilapidated cottage tucked between overgrown bushes and a sprawling field. Its shutters hung crooked, and ivy crept up the stone walls, giving it an air of abandonment. Claire paused, her heart heavy with anticipation. Jamie stood beside her, his hands jammed into his coat pockets, his gaze fixed on the building with a mix of trepidation and resolve. "This is it," Claire said softly. Jamie nodded, his expression unreadable. "Do you think she's here?" "I don't know," Claire admitted. "But if she was ever here, we might find something that tells us where she went." They approached the door cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the damp ground. Claire knocked, the sound echoing hollowly against the wood. When there was no answer, Jamie reached for the handle. It creaked as he turned it, and the door swung open with surprising ease. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of mildew. The furniture was sparse, a small table, a few mismatched chairs, and a sagging sofa covered with a threadbare blanket. A stack of yellowed newspapers sat on the floor, and a single photograph hung on the wall, its edges curling. Claire stepped into the room, her eyes scanning every detail. The photograph drew her attention. She moved closer, her breath catching when she recognized the faces. It was Eleanor, standing beside a man whose features were strikingly familiar. She reached out, her fingers brushing the frame as the realization hit her. "Jamie," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Look!" Jamie joined her, his eyes narrowing as he studied the image. "That's her and him." Claire nodded, her mind racing. The man in the photo was unmistakably Jonathan Whitmore, her late husband. But his presence alongside Eleanor raised questions she wasn't prepared to answer. What had brought him here, and why had he sought Eleanor out? Before she could dwell on the implications, a noise from the back of the house startled them. Jamie spun around, his posture tense. "Someone's here," he said, his voice low. They moved cautiously toward the sound, Claire's heart pounding in her chest. The creak of a floorboard led them to a small room at the rear of the cottage. Inside, a figure stood by a wooden chest, their back turned. The person froze at the sound of their approach, then turned slowly to face them. It was Thomas. "Thomas!" Claire gasped, disbelief coloring her tone. "What are you doing here?" Thomas's face was a mix of surprise and something Claire couldn't quite place. Guilt, perhaps. "Claire," he said, his voice steady but strained. "I didn't expect you to arrive so soon." Jamie stepped forward, his jaw tight. "What's going on? Why are you here?" Thomas hesitated, his gaze shifting between them. "I've been tracking Eleanor for years, even after you stopped asking me to. When I found out about this place, I thought I might uncover something valuable." "Valuable?" Jamie echoed, his tone sharp. "You mean for us, or for you?" Claire's stomach churned as Thomas's expression faltered. The man she had trusted for decades, the one who had promised to help her find answers, now stood before her like a stranger. "I've been working on this case for a long time," Thomas said, his voice defensive. "Longer than either of you realize. Eleanor's disappearance wasn't just about protecting the boy, it was about protecting something bigger. Your family, Claire. They had secrets, and Eleanor was right in the middle of it." Claire's breath caught. "What are you talking about?" Thomas gestured to the chest. "This isn't just about Jamie or Henry. Your husband, Jonathan, had connections, dangerous ones. Eleanor knew things she wasn't supposed to, and she took those secrets with her when she left." "I'm trying to piece it all together." Jamie's fists clenched at his sides. "So what? You've been using us." "I was trying to protect you," Thomas snapped. "Both of you. But there are people who don't want this truth to come out. If we're not careful, we could all be in danger." Claire's head swam with confusion and anger. "You should have told me," she said, her voice trembling. "After everything we've been through, you owed me the truth." Thomas looked away, his silence an admission of guilt. Jamie turned to Claire, his eyes blazing. This was a mistake. Trusting him was a mistake. "Jamie," Claire began, but he shook his head, his frustration boiling over. "I'm done," he said, his voice rising. "Every time we get close to answers, someone lies or hides something. I can't do this anymore." Before Claire could stop him, Jamie stormed out of the house, the sound of the door slamming reverberating through the empty space. Claire turned back to Thomas, her emotions a tangle of betrayal and desperation. "This isn't over," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "But if you're hiding anything else, Thomas, you'd better tell me now." Thomas met her gaze, his expression grim. "You need to find Eleanor Clare. She's the only one who can make sense of all this." With those words, the fragile trust between them shattered, leaving Claire to face the unraveling truth alone. Claire Whitmore stood alone in the cold, the weight of betrayal and Jamie's departure pressing heavily on her chest. The countryside around the cottage stretched endlessly, the stillness amplifying the whirlwind of emotions within her. She had always trusted Thomas, but his actions in the house had left her questioning everything. The photograph of Eleanor and Jonathan was tucked safely in her coat pocket, but it burned there, a reminder of the secrets her family had kept and the walls they had built around their lives. She couldn't lose Jamie. Not now, when they were so close to the truth. Claire made her way back to the small inn where they had been staying. She wasn't surprised to find Jamie's room empty, his few belongings gone. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hand trembling as she reached for her phone. After a deep breath, she called Thomas. "We need to talk," she said the moment he picked up. "I figured you'd call," he replied, his tone subdued. Claire's voice was steely. "No more half-truths, Thomas. If you want to help, tell me everything, now." There was a pause, and then Thomas sighed. "I've pieced together enough to know that Jonathan was involved in something dangerous. It wasn't just business deals. There were people he owed favors to, powerful people. Eleanor knew something that threatened them, and she used it to protect herself and the boy." "And Henry?" Claire asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Was he part of this?" "I don't know," Thomas admitted. "But I think Eleanor took him because she believed it was the only way to keep him safe." Claire closed her eyes, the pieces of the puzzle swirling chaotically in her mind. "I need to find her, Thomas, before this destroys everything." Thomas's voice softened. "There's one more place I haven't told you about. A contact of mine in Wales says Eleanor might have passed through there. It's remote, far from prying eyes." Claire straightened. "Then that's where I'll go." "I'll come with you," Thomas offered. "No," Claire said firmly. "You've done enough. I need to do this on my own." After ending the call, Claire gathered her belongings and set out to find Jamie. She searched the nearby village, her heart sinking as the hours passed with no sign of him. Just as she was about to give up, she spotted him in the distance, sitting on a low stone wall by the edge of a field. His violin case was at his feet, and his shoulders were hunched against the cold. "Jamie," she called, her voice carrying through the still air. He didn't turn, but he didn't move away either, so she approached cautiously. "I thought you'd left," she said quietly. Jamie shrugged without looking at her. "I thought about it." Claire sat down beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I don't blame you for being angry. Thomas should have been honest with us from the beginning." "It's not just him," Jamie said, his voice rough. "It's everything. Everyone has secrets, and I'm tired of feeling like I'm the last to know." Claire nodded, her heart aching for him. "You're right to feel that way, but walking away won't give you the answers you're looking for." Jamie turned to her then, his green eyes filled with uncertainty. "What if the answers make everything worse?" "They might," Claire admitted, "but they might also bring you peace. And no matter what we find, I promise you won't face it alone." Jamie studied her for a long moment before finally nodding. "All right," he said. "What's the plan?" Claire's relief was palpable. "Thomas gave me another lead. A place in Wales. If Eleanor's still alive or if she left anything behind, it might be there." Jamie's brow furrowed. "You really think she's still out there?" "I have to believe she is," Claire said. "And I think you do too." They returned to the inn and quickly packed their things, setting out early the next morning. The journey to Wales was long, the narrow roads winding through mist-shrouded hills and valleys. Claire drove with quiet determination, her focus on the horizon, while Jamie stared out the window, his thoughts a mystery. When they finally arrived, the safe house was little more than a crumbling stone cottage perched on the edge of a cliff. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks below filled the air, a stark contrast to the quiet countryside they had left behind. They approached the house cautiously, their steps crunching on the gravel path. The door was locked, but Claire spotted a broken window on the side. Jamie climbed through first, then helped her inside. The interior was sparse, with only a few pieces of furniture and a thin layer of dust covering everything. Claire's eyes scanned the room, searching for anything that might offer a clue. "Over here," Jamie called from a corner. Claire joined him to find a small chest, its hinges rusted but intact. Jamie pried it open, revealing a stack of notebooks, letters, and photographs. Claire's hands shook as she reached for the first notebook, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. "It's Eleanor's," she whispered. Jamie picked up one of the photographs, his expression softening as he held it out to her. It showed a younger Eleanor, standing with a boy who could only be Henry. The boy's smile was tentative, his violin tucked under one arm. Claire felt tears prick her eyes as she studied the image. "We're close," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We're so close." Jamie nodded, a flicker of hope crossing his face. For the first time in years, it felt like they were standing on the edge of the truth, and whatever came next, they would face it together. The wind howled against the stone walls of the crumbling cottage as Claire, Whitmore, and Jamie sat huddled over Eleanor's notebooks. The dim light from a single camping lantern flickered, casting shadows on the walls as they pored over pages filled with hurried, looping handwriting. The letters and photographs spread across the dusty floor, painted a picture of a woman caught between loyalty and fear. A life lived on the run to protect those she loved. Claire's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The words seemed to leap from the paper, revealing truths she had both longed for and dreaded. Eleanor's notes detailed her escape from New York, her decision to take Henry into hiding, and the constant threat of being discovered. Scattered among the entries were cryptic mentions of Jonathan Whitmore, Claire's late husband, and his connections to powerful figures who had cast long, dangerous shadows over their family's history. "The boy must be safe," Claire read aloud, her voice breaking. "He has a gift the world will try to exploit. Jonathan's involvement only complicates things. If they find us, it's over." Jamie sat cross-legged beside her, a photograph clutched tightly in his hands. It was the one they had found earlier, of Eleanor standing beside a young Henry, his violin in hand. "She was protecting both of us," Jamie said quietly. "But from what? What did Jonathan do?" Claire swallowed hard, the weight of her husband's secrets pressing heavily on her chest. "I don't know," she admitted, but Eleanor clearly believed he was a threat. "That's why she disappeared." Before either of them could speak further, a sharp noise outside shattered the silence. Claire froze, her pulse quickening. Jamie's head snapped up, his eyes wide with alarm. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Claire nodded, her heart pounding. The sound came again, a rustling, followed by the crunch of footsteps on gravel. Someone was outside. Jamie scrambled to his feet, his movements swift and silent. He grabbed the lantern and extinguished it, plunging the room into darkness. Claire's breath caught as she felt Jamie's hand on her arm, guiding her to a corner of the room. They crouched low, their backs pressed against the cold stone wall. The footsteps grew louder, deliberate and heavy. A shadow passed the broken window, momentarily blocking the pale moonlight. Claire's mind raced. Was it Thomas, returning to explain himself? Or someone else, someone far more dangerous? The door creaked open, and the dim outline of a man appeared in the doorway. He stood there for a moment, silhouetted against the night, before stepping inside. The beam of a flashlight swept across the room, illuminating the scattered papers and open chest. Claire's breath hitched as the light passed dangerously close to where they hid. "Whoever's in here, come out now," the man said, his voice cold and commanding. Jamie tensed beside her, his fingers gripping her arm. Claire could feel his fear, but she also sensed his determination. They couldn't give themselves away. Not yet. The man moved deeper into the room, his footsteps deliberate. He picked up one of the notebooks, flipping through it before shoving it into his coat pocket. "Eleanor always did like to keep her secrets," he muttered to himself. Claire's blood ran cold. Whoever this man was, he knew Eleanor, and he was looking for something specific. As the flashlight beam swept toward their corner again, Jamie suddenly stood, his violin case in hand. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice defiant. "What do you think you're doing?" The man turned sharply, his flashlight landing on Jamie. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his tone laced with suspicion. Jamie squared his shoulders, his grip on the violin case tightening. "I could ask you the same thing." The man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied Jamie. "You're him," he said, realization dawning. "The boy, Eleanor's boy." Claire's breath caught as she rose slowly from her hiding spot, her voice trembling but firm. "Leave him alone." The man turned to her, his expression hardening. "You must be Claire Whitmore," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "Jonathan's widow." Claire met his gaze, refusing to back down. "Who are you? What do you want?" "My name doesn't matter," the man replied. "I'm here for what Eleanor left behind. Whatever she told you, whatever you think you've found, it ends here." Jamie stepped forward, his anger boiling over. "You don't get to decide that," he said fiercely. "She gave up everything to protect us. You can't just erase that." The man smirked, his gaze shifting between them. "You think you're untouchable. You have no idea who you're dealing with." In that moment, Claire realized the depth of the danger they were in. This man wasn't just a shadow from Eleanor's past. He was part of the darkness Jonathan had entangled their family in, and he was willing to do whatever it took to keep those secrets buried. "Get out," Claire said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "You have no right to be here." The man's smirk faded, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. "This isn't over," he said, stepping back toward the door. "You'd do well to remember that." As he disappeared into the night, Claire and Jamie stood frozen, the tension in the room palpable. When the sound of his footsteps faded completely, Jamie turned to her, his face pale but resolute. "We need to go," he said. "Now." Claire nodded, her mind racing. The confrontation had made one thing clear: their search for the truth had drawn dangerous attention, and the stakes were higher than ever. But despite the fear gripping her, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had come too far to turn back now. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, no matter the cost. The cottage's interior was eerily silent, save for the rhythmic pounding of Claire Whitmore's heart. She and Jamie exchanged a glance, their expressions a mix of fear and unspoken determination. The confrontation with the intruder had left them shaken, but it also solidified the reality of the dangers they faced. Whoever that man was, he hadn't just stumbled upon the cottage, he had been searching for them. Jamie paced the small room, his movements sharp with agitation. "We can't stay here," he said finally, his voice breaking the tense silence. "He'll come back, maybe with others." Claire nodded, though her thoughts were consumed by the photograph and Eleanor's notebooks. "You're right," she said, "but we can't leave without taking everything Eleanor left behind. It's all we have." Jamie stopped pacing, his gaze falling on the chest they had found. "Do you think she knew this would happen?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "That people would come after her, even after all these years?" "I think she hoped it wouldn't," Claire replied, "but Eleanor was prepared for it. That's why she left this for us, to give us a chance to understand." Together, they worked quickly, gathering the notebooks, letters, and photographs into Jamie's worn backpack. Claire's hands trembled as she folded one of the older photographs, her thumb brushing over Henry's face. It struck her how much time had passed, how many years of silence and unanswered questions had led them to this moment. As they secured the last of the items, Jamie glanced toward the window. "We need to move before it gets light," he said. "If that guy's still out there, I don't want him following us." Claire agreed. They extinguished the lantern and slipped out of the cottage into the night. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of salt from the sea below. Jamie led the way, his footsteps light on the gravel path. Claire followed closely, clutching her coat tightly against the chill. The narrow path wound down toward the village, the lights of a single pub glimmering faintly in the distance. It was their only hope for transportation, as their rental car was parked miles away, near the station where they had arrived. Inside the pub, the warm glow of the fireplace was a stark contrast to the cold night outside. A handful of locals sat at the bar, their voices low and indistinct. Jamie approached the bartender, a burly man with a thick Welsh accent, and asked about arranging a cab. "It'll take some time," the bartender said, dialing a number on the landline behind the counter. "Not many drivers out at this hour." Jamie returned to the table where Claire sat, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. "He's calling someone," Jamie said. "We just have to wait." The minutes stretched painfully as they sat in the pub, their nerves on edge. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though she tried to dismiss it as paranoia. Jamie, too, seemed restless, his leg bouncing under the table. Finally, the bartender approached them. "Car's on its way," he said. "Should be here in 15 minutes. "Thank you," Claire said, her relief palpable. They stepped outside to wait, the cold air biting at their faces. The village was quiet, the narrow streets deserted. Jamie kept glancing over his shoulder, his grip tightening on the strap of his backpack. When the cab arrived, they climbed in quickly, giving the driver the address of their rental car. The ride was uneventful. the driver making polite small talk that neither of them engaged with. By the time they reached the car, dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in muted hues of pink and grey. As they transferred their belongings to the car, Jamie paused, his hand resting on the backpack. "Where do we go now?" he asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Claire hesitated, her mind racing. "We need to figure out who that man was and what he wanted," she said. Thomas might have answers. Jamie's jaw tightened at the mention of Thomas, but he didn't argue. "Fine," he said. "But if he's hiding anything else?" Claire placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but firm. "We'll handle it," she said. "Together." The drive back to their rented flat was tense, both of them lost in their thoughts. When they arrived, Claire immediately called Thomas, her voice clipped and urgent as she recounted what had happened at the cottage. "There was a man there," she said. "He knew Eleanor. He mentioned Jonathan. What aren't you telling us, Thomas?" There was a pause on the other end of the line before Thomas sighed. "I was hoping it wouldn't come to this," he said. "That man works for someone tied to Jonathan's old dealings. If he knows you're involved, things are more dangerous than I thought." "More dangerous?" Claire repeated, her anger flaring. "You knew this was a possibility, and you didn't warn us." "I didn't think they'd still be looking," Thomas said defensively. "It's been decades." "That's not good enough," Claire snapped. "We need the truth, Thomas. All of it." Thomas hesitated again, but finally he relented. "There's one more person you need to talk to," he said. "Someone who was close to Jonathan. They might be able to fill in the gaps." "Who?" Claire demanded. "I'll send you the address," Thomas said, "but be careful. You're in deeper than you realize." As the call ended, Claire turned to Jamie. "It's not over yet," she said, her voice resolute. Jamie nodded, his expression grim. "It never is." The address Thomas provided led Claire and Jamie to a small, nondescript house on the outskirts of Bath, a place hidden away from the prying eyes of the bustling city. The area was quiet, with bare trees swaying in the wind and a faint drizzle settling over the rooftops. Claire gripped the steering wheel tightly as they approached, her knuckles white. Jamie sat in silence beside her, his gaze fixed on the house as though willing it to reveal its secrets before they even stepped inside. "This is it," Claire said softly, cutting the engine. Jamie nodded but didn't move. His hands rested on his knees, clenched tightly, as if bracing himself for whatever awaited them. Claire placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "We'll face it together," she said, her voice firm but kind. They approached the door, Claire's footsteps steady while Jamie hesitated behind her. She knocked, the sound echoing in the stillness of the afternoon. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a woman in her 60s with a sharp gaze that seemed to take in everything at once. Her dark hair was streaked with grey, pulled into a loose bun at the nape of her neck. She wore a simple cardigan, but there was an air of authority about her, as though she had seen far more than she let on. "You must be Claire," the woman said, her voice cool and measured. "And this must be Jamie." Claire nodded, stepping forward. "You must be Margaret." The woman's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. The interior of the house was sparse but tidy, with minimal furniture and a faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. Margaret led them to a small sitting room, gesturing for them to take a seat on the worn sofa. She settled into an armchair across from them, her sharp eyes never leaving their faces. "I've been expecting you," she said simply. Jamie frowned. "Expecting us? How?" Margaret folded her hands in her lap. "Thomas told me you'd come eventually. He thought it was time you knew the truth." Claire leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "The truth about Eleanor? About Jonathan? Please, Whatever you know, we need to hear it." Margaret sighed, her gaze softening slightly as she looked at Jamie. "Eleanor did everything she could to protect you," she began. "She knew Jonathan's dealings would eventually put you at risk. That's why she disappeared." "What dealings?" Jamie asked, his voice sharp. "What did he do?" Margaret hesitated, her expression pained. "Jonathan was involved with powerful men who didn't take kindly to betrayal. When Eleanor discovered what he was truly involved in, she threatened to expose them, but she underestimated how far they'd go to keep their secrets." Claire's heart sank, the weight of Margaret's words pressing down on her. "So she ran," she said quietly, "to protect Jamie and Henry." Margaret nodded. She believed the only way to keep them safe was to vanish completely. She took Henry because she knew he was already caught in Jonathan's web. His talent, his potential, it made him valuable to them. Jamie shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. "Why didn't she just tell me?" he demanded. "Why all the lies and secrecy?" Margaret met his gaze, her expression sorrowful. "She thought the less you knew, the safer you'd be. She didn't want you to carry the burden of her decisions." Jamie looked away, his hands clenching into fists. Claire reached for him, placing a comforting hand on his knee. "We'll figure this out," she said softly. "We'll make sense of it." Margaret studied them for a moment before rising from her chair. "There's something else," she said. "Something Eleanor left behind for you." She disappeared into another room, returning moments later with a small, locked box. She handed it to Jamie, her expression grave. "She told me to keep this safe until the time was right." Jamie stared at the box, his hands trembling as he took it. "What's inside?" Margaret shook her head. "I don't know, but she believed it would help you understand." Jamie set the box on the table, his fingers fumbling with the lock. Claire watched as he opened it, revealing a stack of letters, photographs, and a single, worn journal. Jamie picked up the journal, his breath catching as he recognized the handwriting. "It's hers," he whispered. Claire leaned closer, her heart aching as she saw the pages filled with Eleanor's words. Jamie flipped through the journal, his eyes scanning the entries with a mix of longing and sorrow. One page in particular caught his attention, and he read it aloud. "Jamie, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way back to the truth. I'm sorry for everything, for the lies, the distance, the fear. I only wanted to protect you. Never doubt how much I loved you." Jamie's voice broke as he finished the entry, his shoulders trembling. Claire reached for him, pulling him into a gentle embrace. "She loved you," she said softly. "She did all of this for you." As Jamie clung to her, Margaret watched silently, her expression unreadable. When Jamie finally pulled away, his eyes were red but resolute. "What do we do now?" he asked. Claire met Margaret's gaze, her own determination mirrored in the older woman's eyes. "We finish what Eleanor started," she said. "We make sure her sacrifices weren't in vain." Margaret nodded, her voice firm. "But be careful. The people who came after Eleanor haven't forgotten her or her family." Claire and Jamie left the house as the rain began to fall, the box of Eleanor's belongings tucked safely in Jamie's arms. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but for the first time they felt a glimmer of hope. Together, they would uncover the truth and honor the sacrifices that had brought them this far. The drive back to the flat was enveloped in a heavy silence, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of paper as Jamie thumbed through Eleanor's journal. The rain tapped lightly against the windows, a soothing rhythm that belied the storm brewing within their hearts. Claire Whitmore kept her eyes on the road, but her thoughts raced as she replayed Margaret's words. Jonathan's betrayals, Eleanor's sacrifices, each revelation pulled her deeper into a world she had never fully understood. Jamie suddenly broke the silence. "She was scared all the time," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Every page. It's like she was running from something she couldn't even name." Claire glanced at him, her chest tightening at the raw vulnerability in his expression. "She was trying to protect you," she said gently. "And Henry. She did everything she could to keep you both safe." Jamie shook his head, his fingers tightening around the journal. "But it didn't work, did it? Henry's still gone, and we're just left with pieces of a story that doesn't make sense." Claire pulled the car over onto the side of the road, the drizzle now thickening into a steady rain. She turned to Jamie, her voice steady but firm. "It does make sense," she said. "Not in the way we hoped, but it's starting to. Eleanor knew the risks, and she still chose to protect you and Henry. That's not failure, Jamie. That's love." Jamie looked at her, his green eyes clouded with doubt, but tinged with something else. Hope. "What if we never find him?" he asked, his voice cracking. "What if all this leads nowhere?" Claire reached across the console, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Then we'll know we tried," she said. "But I believe we'll find him. I have to believe that." Jamie nodded slowly, his resolve visibly strengthening. "All right," he said. "What's next?" The rain had lessened by the time they reached the flat. Claire spread Eleanor's letters and photographs across the small dining table, their edges frayed and ink smudged from years of wear. Jamie sat across from her, studying each item with the same intensity she felt coursing through her. "We need to follow the trail Eleanor left," Claire said. "If she trusted Margaret to keep this box, there's a chance she left clues for us to find." Jamie picked up a faded photograph of Eleanor and Henry, the latter holding his violin with a shy smile. "She wrote about a music hall," he said, flipping to a specific page in the journal. "She called it a safe place." Claire's brow furrowed as she scanned the entry. "Do you recognize the name?" Jamie shook his head. "No, but if it's connected to Henry's music, maybe someone there knows something." Claire nodded, her determination growing. "We'll start there." The following morning, they set out for the music hall, its location scrawled in the margins of Eleanor's journal. The building was nestled in the heart of Bristol, its grand facade a testament to its storied history. Inside, the scent of polished wood and old sheet music filled the air, evoking a sense of timelessness. A woman greeted them at the front desk, her smile warm but curious. "How can I help you?" she asked. "We're looking for someone who might have played here," Claire said, her voice steady. "His name is Henry Whitmore." The woman's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "Henry Whitmore," she repeated. "Yes, I remember him, a talented violinist. He performed here years ago, but..." Jamie leaned forward, his voice urgent. "But what?" The woman hesitated. "He stopped coming abruptly. There were rumors about a disagreement, a falling out with someone who managed him. I don't know the details." Claire exchanged a glance with Jamie, her mind racing. "Do you have records of his performances?" she asked. The woman nodded. "We keep archives. Follow me." In the dimly lit archive room, they pored over old programs and photographs. Jamie's hands trembled as he found Henry's name listed alongside other musicians. A faded photograph showed him mid-performance, his expression serene and focused. "He was here," Jamie said softly, his voice filled with both wonder and sadness. Claire placed a hand on his shoulder. "And he left a mark," she said. "That means something." As they continued their search, Jamie discovered a note tucked inside one of the programs. The handwriting was unmistakably Henry's, scrawled in the margins. "If you find this, you know where to look." Jamie's breath caught. "What does that mean?" he asked. showing the note to Claire. Claire studied it carefully, her mind working to decipher its meaning. "It's a message," she said. "He left it for us, or for someone else he trusted." Jamie's expression hardened with determination. "Then we keep looking," he said. "We don't stop until we find him." Claire nodded, her resolve matching his. They gathered the documents and left the music hall, the weight of the past pressing heavily on their shoulders but fueling their purpose. For the first time in years, the scattered fragments of their lives seemed to be aligning, guiding them toward the truth. As they walked back to the car, Jamie glanced at Claire, his voice quiet but firm. "Thank you," he said. Claire turned to him, her expression softening. "For what?" "For not giving up," he said. "For believing in this, believing in me." Claire smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "We're in this together," she said, "and we're not done yet." Jamie nodded, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. They had a long road ahead, but for the first time, it felt like they were no longer chasing shadows. Together, they would uncover the truth, and finally, perhaps, find peace. The wind whipped through the narrow streets of the bustling London market, carrying with it the rich aromas of fresh bread and roasted chestnuts. Claire Whitmore pulled her coat tighter around her, the crisp air nipping at her cheeks. Beside her, Jamie clutched Eleanor's journal in one hand, his other jammed into his pocket as he scanned the vibrant scene. They were exhausted, physically and emotionally, but their determination outweighed their fatigue. They had followed Henry's cryptic message from the music hall, piecing together locations Eleanor had once described. Each step brought them closer to this moment, a place Henry had frequented in the years after his disappearance. The market teemed with life, vendors calling out their wares and shoppers bustling about, their laughter and chatter forming a lively hum that seemed almost out of place against the somber weight of Claire and Jamie's mission. "Do you think he's really here?" Jamie asked, his voice barely audible above the din. Claire hesitated, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "I don't know," she admitted, "but this feels right." Jamie nodded, though his expression remained guarded. He had grown adept at bracing himself for disappointment, a habit forged by years of longing and uncertainty. Still, Claire saw the glimmer of hope in his eyes, a hope that mirrored her own. They moved through the market, pausing at every corner to search for a face they hadn't seen in decades. Jamie's grip on the journal tightened with each step, his jaw set in determination. Claire's heart ached for him, for both of them. They had come so far, endured so much, and now they were on the brink of something that felt almost too fragile to grasp. Then, from the other side of the square, a hauntingly familiar sound cut through the noise. A violin, its melody weaving through the air like a thread connecting past and present. Jamie froze, his breath catching in his throat. Claire followed his gaze to a small performance space where a figure stood, violin tucked under his chin, his bow dancing across the strings with effortless grace. It was him, Henry. Claire's hand flew to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. She recognized him instantly, despite the years that had passed. His hair, once dark and unruly, was now streaked with gray, but his posture, his intensity, his music, they were unchanged. The melody he played was one she had heard countless times before, a composition he had created as a boy, its notes imbued with a bittersweet beauty that spoke of longing and love. Jamie took a hesitant step forward, his legs trembling beneath him. "It's him," he whispered, as though saying it too loudly might break the spell. Claire placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Go to him," she urged, her voice thick with emotion. Jamie nodded, his steps tentative at first, but gaining confidence as he moved closer. The crowd parted around him, the music drawing them in, but blurring into the background as Jamie neared the man who had haunted his dreams for years. Henry's eyes lifted from his violin, the melody faltering as he caught sight of Jamie. For a moment, the two of them simply stared at each other, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between them. Then slowly, Henry lowered his violin, his hands trembling as he took a step forward. "Jamie," he said, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Jamie nodded, his own voice breaking as he replied, "It's me." Henry's face crumpled, tears streaming down his cheeks as he closed the distance between them, pulling Jamie into a tight embrace. Jamie clung to him, his own tears falling freely, the years of separation and pain dissolving in that single, profound moment. Claire watched from a few steps away, her own tears flowing as she witnessed the reunion she had dreamed of for so long. Her heart swelled with both joy and sorrow, the sight of her two sons together again filling her with a deep, aching gratitude. After what felt like an eternity, Henry pulled back, his hands resting on Jamie's shoulders as he studied him. "You've grown so much," he said, his voice filled with awe. I thought I'd never see you again." Jamie shook his head, a watery smile breaking through his tears. "I never stopped looking for you." Henry's gaze shifted to Claire, his expression softening as he took her in. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for him. "Henry," she said, her voice cracking. "Oh, Henry." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as though afraid she might disappear. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, "for everything." Claire shook her head, her tears soaking into his coat. "You're here," she said. "That's all that matters." The three of them stood together, the world around them fading into insignificance. For the first time in years, they were a family again, bound not by answers, but by the unshakable love that had endured through decades of pain and loss. As the market bustled on around them, Claire felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. There were still questions to answer, still wounds to heal, but for now, this moment was enough. The small apartment in central London, where Claire, Jamie, and Henry gathered, bore the humble marks of a life lived quietly but with purpose. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting soft patterns on the walls as the three sat at the worn kitchen table. It had been 2 days since the emotional reunion at the market, yet the weight of what had passed lingered in the air, intermingled with an unspoken yearning for clarity and connection. Claire placed a cup of tea in front of Henry, her hands steady despite the storm of emotions brewing inside her. His face, so familiar yet aged with lines of hardship and resilience, was a bittersweet reminder of the years they had lost. Jamie sat beside her, fidgeting slightly, his gaze fixed on Henry as though afraid he might vanish if he looked away. Henry cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "I owe you both an explanation," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I've carried this alone for too long." Claire reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on his. "We're here," she said. "Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone anymore." Henry nodded, taking a deep breath. "After Eleanor took me, we moved constantly," he began. "She never stayed in one place for more than a few months, always looking over her shoulder. At first, I didn't understand why. She told me it was to protect me, but I thought she was just being paranoid." His eyes grew distant as he continued. "It wasn't until I was older that I realized how much danger we were in. Jonathan's dealings had left a trail of enemies, and Eleanor feared they'd come for us if they ever found out where we were. She kept me away from music for years, afraid it would make me too visible. But I couldn't let it go. It was the one part of my old life I couldn't give up." Jamie leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "So, you started playing again?" Henry nodded. "I found small venues, places off the radar. For a while it felt safe. But then someone recognized me. Someone connected to Jonathan. Eleanor found out and insisted we leave immediately. That was the last time I saw her." Claire's breath caught. "She left you?" Henry shook his head. "Not willingly. She said she had one last thing to do, something to ensure my safety. She told me to stay put, that she'd be back, but she never returned." Jamie's jaw tightened, his frustration evident. "Why didn't you try to find her?" "I did," Henry said, his voice heavy with regret, "but every trail went cold. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air. Eventually, I stopped looking. I thought maybe she'd finally found peace." Claire's heart ached as she listened, her mind racing with the implications of Henry's story. "You stayed here all these years," she said, "hiding in plain sight." Henry nodded, his gaze falling to the table. "I didn't know what else to do. The music kept me grounded, gave me something to hold on to, but I never stopped thinking about you, about Jamie." Jamie's expression softened, the anger in his eyes giving way to something deeper. "I thought you forgot about me," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you didn't want me." Henry looked at him, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I could never forget you," he said. "Not for a single day." The room fell into a contemplative silence, the three of them absorbing the enormity of what had been said. Claire, ever the anchor, finally spoke. "We've found each other now," she said, her voice steady. "That's what matters." Henry managed a small smile, the first genuine one Claire had seen in years. "You're right," he said, "but I want to make up for the time we lost. I don't know how, but I'll try." Jamie smiled faintly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "We'll figure it out," he said, "together." The rest of the day passed in quiet reflection, the three of them rediscovering the rhythms of family life. Jamie played his violin for Henry, the haunting melody of Jamie's song filling the small apartment with a poignant beauty that brought tears to Claire's eyes. Henry watched in awe, his pride evident as he marveled at Jamie's talent. "You've surpassed me," Henry said with a chuckle, though his voice carried a note of genuine admiration. "Eleanor would be so proud." Jamie's smile widened, the weight of his brother's words settling over him like a warm embrace. For the first time, he felt truly seen, not as the lost boy Eleanor had protected, but as the person he had become. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in a golden glow, Claire found herself sitting alone with Henry. They spoke in hushed tones, their conversation weaving through memories of the past and hopes for the future. "Do you think she's still out there?" Claire asked, her voice laced with both hope and fear. Henry hesitated before answering. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But if anyone could survive everything she's been through, it's Eleanor." Claire nodded, her heart aching with both longing and gratitude. They had found Henry, a piece of their fractured family restored. And though the road ahead was uncertain, Claire knew they would face it together, drawing strength from the bonds that had endured despite everything. As the night settled over London, Claire felt a glimmer of peace she hadn't known in years. For the first time, the weight of the past felt lighter, the promise of a reimagined future offering a quiet hope. They weren't whole yet, but they were together. And for now, that was enough. The soft patter of rain against the window filled the quiet apartment, a soothing rhythm that seemed to echo the contemplative mood inside. Claire Whitmore sat in the living room, her hands wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea. Across the room, Jamie and Henry were seated at the small dining table, their heads bent over a sheet of music. Jamie's violin rested beside him, its polished wood catching the muted light of the late afternoon. Claire watched them with a quiet sense of awe, There was something deeply comforting about the way they leaned toward each other, their voices low as they discussed the notes scrawled on the page. For years, she had carried the weight of their separation, the loss of Henry a constant ache in her heart. Now, seeing them together, she felt a glimmer of hope, fragile but growing stronger with each passing moment. Henry looked up, catching her gaze. "You've been awfully quiet, Mom," he said with a small smile. "What's on your mind?" Claire hesitated, her emotions swirling like the rain outside. "Just thinking," she said finally, "about how far we've come." Jamie glanced over at her, his expression softening. "It feels strange, doesn't it?" he said. "Being here, together, after everything." Claire nodded. "Strange, but wonderful," she said, "and long overdue." Henry leaned back in his chair, his hands resting on the edge of the table. "I still can't believe it," he admitted. "I spent so many years thinking I'd never see either of you again." Claire set her cup down, her fingers tracing the rim. "I think we all lost hope at some point," she said, "but somehow we found our way back." The room fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from shared understanding. Jamie picked up his violin, his fingers brushing lightly over the strings. "Play something for us," Henry suggested, his tone encouraging. Jamie hesitated for a moment before nodding. He lifted the instrument to his shoulder, drawing the bow across the strings with practiced ease. The melody that filled the room was soft and haunting, a piece that seemed to capture the essence of their journey, full of longing, pain, and the quiet beauty of reunion. Claire closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. It reminded her of the nights she had spent listening to Henry play as a boy, his talent already evident even then, and now to hear Jamie's music intertwining with those memories. It felt like a gift, one she hadn't dared to hope for. When the final note faded, Henry clapped softly, his pride evident. "That was beautiful," he said. "You've grown into an incredible musician." Jamie's cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude. "I had a good teacher," he said quietly, his gaze flickering toward Claire. She smiled, her heart swelling with love for both of them. "And now you have each other," she said, "to learn from, to lean on." The words hung in the air, a reminder of how far they had come and how much further they could go together. Claire stood and crossed the room, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "We've been given a second chance," she said. "Let's make the most of it." The rain continued to fall as the afternoon stretched into evening. Henry cooked dinner, a simple pasta dish that filled the apartment with the comforting aroma of garlic and herbs. They ate together at the small table, sharing stories and laughter that felt both new and familiar. It was as if the years of separation were slowly being mended, the threads of their family woven back together with care. Later, as Jamie cleared the dishes and Henry retired to the bedroom to rest, Claire found herself alone in the living room once again. She retrieved Eleanor's journal from the coffee table, her fingers brushing over the worn leather cover. Opening it, she turned to a page she hadn't read before, the handwriting slanted and hurried. "If you're reading this, Claire, it means you found him. My heart is lighter knowing you're together again. Take care of each other and know that everything I did was out of love. I hope you can forgive me." Claire's vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. She pressed a hand to her mouth, her heart aching with a mixture of grief and gratitude. Eleanor's sacrifice had brought them to this moment, and though her absence was deeply felt, Claire knew her sister's love would always be a part of their lives. Jamie returned to the room, his brow furrowing as he saw her tears. "Mom, are you all right?" She looked up, her expression softening as she wiped her cheeks. "I'm fine," she said, "just thinking about Eleanor." Jamie sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on her arm. She gave us a lot, he said, more than we'll ever really understand. Claire nodded, her voice quiet but steady. And now, it's up to us to honor that. They sat together in the fading light, the weight of their journey settling over them like a warm blanket. For the first time in years, Claire felt a sense of peace, not because everything was resolved, but because they were finally moving forward, together. As the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, Claire closed the journal and placed it back on the table. She looked at Jamie, her heart full. "We're going to be all right," she said. Jamie smiled, his confidence growing. "Yeah," he said. "We are." The morning sunlight poured through the windows of Claire Whitmore's modest London flat, casting a golden glow over the tidy living room. The warmth of the light seemed to mirror the transformation within the small family that now shared the space. Jamie was at the dining table, carefully tightening the strings on his violin, while Henry stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee into two mismatched mugs. Claire, seated in her favorite armchair, watched them with quiet contentment, her knitting needles clicking softly as she worked on a scarf for the coming winter. It had been weeks since their reunion at the market, and though the wounds of the past were still healing, their days were filled with a sense of purpose and hope. Jamie had resumed his studies, practicing tirelessly for an upcoming audition at a prestigious music conservatory. Henry, once a shadow of his former self, had begun to emerge from the isolation of his self-imposed exile, offering to mentor Jamie in preparation for the performance. The sound of the violin filled the room as Jamie played a delicate piece, his fingers dancing over the strings with precision. Henry set the coffee mugs on the table and leaned against the counter, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth as he listened. "You've improved," Henry said after Jamie finished, his voice filled with quiet pride. "Your phrasing has more depth now." Jamie's cheeks flushed, but his eyes sparkled with appreciation. "Thanks," he said. "I've been trying to focus on telling a story through the music." Claire looked up from her knitting, her heart swelling at the exchange. "You're doing beautifully, Jamie," she said. "I'm sure your audition will be a success." Jamie gave her a grateful smile, though a flicker of doubt passed across his face. "I just hope I can make it through without freezing up," he admitted. Henry crossed the room and placed a reassuring hand on Jamie's shoulder. "You've got this," he said. "Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about connection. Play from your heart and the rest will follow." The words seemed to resonate with Jamie, who nodded, his confidence bolstered by his brother's support. Claire felt a lump rise in her throat as she watched them. The bond between her sons, once fractured by years of separation, was slowly being rebuilt, strengthened by their shared love for music and their determination to move forward. Later that day, the three of them ventured out to a nearby park, their steps light as they strolled along the winding paths. The air was crisp, the trees adorned with the fiery hues of autumn. Jamie carried his violin case, insisting on practicing outdoors for a change of scenery. Henry brought a small notebook, jotting down ideas for a new composition as they walked. They found a quiet spot beneath a towering oak tree, its golden leaves forming a canopy overhead. Jamie set up his music stand, while Henry and Claire settled on a nearby bench, their breaths visible in the chilly air. As Jamie played, passers-by paused to listen, their expressions reflecting the emotions woven into the music. A young couple stopped to sway gently to the melody, their hands clasped tightly. A mother with a stroller lingered, her baby cooing softly as the notes filled the crisp autumn air. Henry leaned toward Claire, his voice low. "He's remarkable," he said. "The way he plays, it's like he's reaching out to everyone who listens." Claire nodded, her eyes glistening with pride. "He's found his voice," she said, "and he's not afraid to use it." Henry smiled, his gaze returning to Jamie. "He reminds me of myself at that age," he admitted, "but he's so much more fearless than I ever was." Claire placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle. "You gave him that courage," she said. "By coming back, by believing in him, you've given him the strength to shine." Henry's expression softened, his eyes misting as he absorbed her words. "I just wish I could have done it sooner," he said quietly. Claire shook her head, her voice steady. "You're here now, Henry. That's what matters." Jamie finished his piece, and the small crowd that had gathered around him erupted into applause. He looked up, his face lighting up with a mixture of surprise and delight. Henry stood, clapping enthusiastically as he approached his brother. "That was incredible," Henry said, his voice brimming with sincerity. "You're going to knock them off their feet at the audition." Jamie grinned, his confidence buoyed by the support of his family and the strangers who had stopped to listen. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, the three of them packed up their things and began the walk home. The air was filled with laughter and easy conversation, the weight of their shared history gradually giving way to the promise of a brighter future. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, the warmth of their connection filled the room. Claire looked at her sons, her heart swelling with gratitude. They had weathered the storms of the past, and though the journey ahead would not be without its challenges, they faced it together with love, resilience, and hope. For Claire, it was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild what had been lost and to cherish the moments they had been given. And as she listened to Jamie and Henry plan their next steps, their voices filled with excitement and determination, she felt a quiet certainty that they were on the path toward healing, not just as individuals, but as a family. A crisp autumn breeze swept through the narrow streets of London as Claire Whitmore sorted through the post that had arrived earlier that morning. Among the usual bills and advertisements lay a thick, cream-colored envelope that bore no return address. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar, elegant yet firm, and the weight of the letter suggested it contained something substantial. Curious, Claire set her cup of tea down and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper folded neatly, along with an aged photograph that made her breath catch. It was a picture of Eleanor standing with Jonathan Whitmore in what appeared to be a garden. Both of them were smiling, but there was a tension in their expressions, a guardedness that Claire now recognized in her late husband's gaze. She unfolded the letter, her heart pounding as she began to read. "Claire, if you're reading this, it means you've found Henry and Jamie. I wish I could be there to share in your joy, but circumstances have kept me far from all of you. There's something you need to know, something I couldn't tell you when we were younger. Jonathan's involvement with those dangerous men wasn't incidental, it was deliberate. He orchestrated much of what happened to our family, including Henry's disappearance. He did it out of fear, trying to protect himself. But in doing so, he placed all of us at risk. I kept this secret because I didn't want to tarnish your memories of him. But I realize now that the truth is the only way to move forward. Enclosed is the last photograph we took together, just before everything fell apart. Look closely. You'll see the fear in his eyes, the regret he carried. He wasn't an evil man, Claire, but he was weak. He couldn't stand up to the forces he had entangled himself with. I hope you'll forgive him and me for all that's been lost. I wish you love and peace as you rebuild with Jamie and Henry. You are stronger than all of us combined. With love, Eleanor." Claire's hands trembled as she finished the letter, the words sinking into her like stones. She stared at the photograph again, her mind racing. Eleanor's revelation was both a gift and a wound, peeling back the final layer of mystery surrounding Jonathan's actions. The man she had loved, the father of her children, had been complicit in their suffering, not out of malice, but out of fear and weakness. "Mum," Jamie's voice broke through her thoughts. Claire looked up to see him standing in the doorway, concern etched on his face. "What is it?" he asked, stepping closer. She hesitated, unsure of how to explain. "It's a letter," she said finally. "From Eleanor." Jamie's brow furrowed as he sat beside her, his eyes scanning the photograph and the letter in her lap. "What does it say?" he asked, his voice quiet. Claire handed it to him, her own voice trembling as she said, "Read it for yourself." Jamie's expression shifted as he read, his jaw tightening and his eyes narrowing. When he finished, he set the letter down, his hands clenched into fists. "He knew," he said, anger lacing his words. "He knew what would happen to us, and he let it happen." Claire reached out, placing a calming hand on his arm. "He wasn't a bad man, Jamie," she said softly. "He made terrible choices, but he wasn't evil." Jamie pulled away, standing and pacing the room. "That doesn't excuse it," he said. "He could have stopped it. He should have stopped it." As the tension in the room grew, Henry appeared in the doorway, drawn by their raised voices. "What's going on?" he asked, his gaze moving between them. Jamie handed him the letter without a word. Henry read it quickly, his expression hardening as he absorbed the contents. "This doesn't surprise me," he said finally, his tone flat. "I always suspected Jonathan was involved. Eleanor hinted at it once, but she never said it outright." Jamie turned to him, his frustration boiling over. "And you're just okay with it?" he demanded. "He destroyed our lives." Henry shook his head. "No, I'm not okay with it," he said. "But I've had years to come to terms with what happened." "Holding on to anger won't change the past?" Jamie stared at him, his chest rising and falling as he struggled to process Henry's words. Finally, he slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. "I don't know how to let it go," he admitted, his voice muffled. Claire moved to sit beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "We do it together," she said, "one step at a time. We can't change what happened, but we can choose how we move forward." Henry joined them, his presence a quiet reassurance. "Eleanor wanted us to know the truth," he said, "but she also wanted us to forgive, not for Jonathan's sake, for ours." The three of them sat in silence, the weight of the letter settling over them like a heavy blanket. But beneath the grief and anger, there was a sense of resolution, a feeling that, for the first time, they could face the truth together. As the sunlight shifted, casting warm patterns on the walls, Claire reached for the photograph. She studied Jonathan's face, searching for the fear and regret Eleanor had described. She saw it now, clear as day. A man trapped by his own choices, desperate to protect his family, but unable to break free from his own mistakes. "I forgive him," she said quietly, her voice steady, "not because he deserves it, but because we deserve peace." Jamie and Henry exchanged a glance, their expressions softening. Slowly, Jamie nodded, his shoulders relaxing as he let out a long breath. "Me too," he said. Henry placed a hand on Claire's. "We're going to be okay," he said, "because we have each other." For the first time, Claire believed it. The concert hall buzzed with quiet anticipation, its arched ceilings and polished wood reverberating with the murmur of an expectant crowd. Claire Whitmore sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she gazed at the stage. Beside her, Henry adjusted his tie, his expression a mix of pride and nervous energy. Tonight was Jamie's moment, a culmination of all the pain, perseverance, and love that had carried their fractured family to this point. The house lights dimmed, and the murmurs faded into silence. Jamie stepped onto the stage, his violin gleaming under the spotlight. He was dressed in a tailored black suit, his posture confident but not arrogant. For a moment, he paused, his green eyes scanning the audience until they landed on Claire and Henry. He smiled, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. And then he turned to the orchestra behind him. The conductor gave a brief nod, and the music began. The opening notes were soft, almost hesitant, like a whisper carried on the wind. Jamie's bow moved with deliberate grace, each stroke drawing out a melody that was both haunting and hopeful. The piece was Jamie's song. The composition Eleanor had left behind, but Jamie had made it his own, weaving in his experiences and emotions to create something new and deeply personal. Claire felt her breath catch as the music swelled, filling the hall with its bittersweet beauty. It was as if the notes were telling their story, the years of separation, the heartbreak of lost time, and the joy of reunion. She glanced at Henry, who was leaning forward in his seat, his eyes glistening as he watched his brother. As the music reached its crescendo, Claire's mind drifted to Eleanor. She could almost feel her sister's presence in the room, her love and sacrifice woven into every note. For so long, Eleanor had carried the weight of their family's secrets, shielding them from the darkness that had threatened to consume them. And now, through Jamie's music, that weight was being lifted. When the final note faded, the silence in the hall was profound. For a moment, no one moved, as if the audience was collectively holding its breath. Then the applause erupted, a thunderous, heartfelt ovation that seemed to shake the very walls of the concert hall. Jamie bowed, his expression one of quiet gratitude, before stepping off the stage. Backstage, Claire and Henry waited anxiously, their hearts full. When Jamie appeared, his violin still in hand, Claire rushed to embrace him, tears streaming down her face. "You were magnificent," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Henry clapped Jamie on the back, his pride evident. "You did it," he said, his voice thick. "You showed them who you are." Jamie smiled, his eyes shining with both relief and joy. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "Both of you." The three of them stood together, the bond between them stronger than ever. For the first time in years, Claire felt a sense of completeness, a feeling that, despite everything, they had found their way back to each other. Later that evening, as they celebrated at a small restaurant, Jamie pulled out a worn envelope and handed it to Claire. "This came for me a few weeks ago," he said. "I thought you should see it." Claire opened the envelope, her hands trembling as she unfolded the letter inside. It was from Eleanor, written years before but never sent. In it, she spoke of her hopes for Jamie and Henry, her dreams of them finding each other and building a life filled with music and love. "If you're reading this, it means I succeeded," the letter concluded. "You found your way back to each other. That's all I ever wanted. Take care of each other and know that I'm always with you, in every note you play and every memory you share." Claire's tears fell freely as she read the words, her heart swelling with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. She passed the letter to Henry, who read it silently, his expression softening as he absorbed Eleanor's final message. Jamie sat quietly, his hand resting lightly on Claire's arm, offering his silent support. As they left the restaurant, the three of them walked arm in arm through the quiet streets, the cool night air wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. The city lights sparkled in the distance, a reminder of the beauty that could be found even in the darkest of times. Claire paused, looking up at the stars. "She would be so proud of us," she said softly, "of what we've become." Henry nodded, his gaze following hers. "She gave us everything," he said, "and we'll honor her by living fully." Jamie smiled, his heart light. "And by playing," he added. "Every note, for her." They continued walking, their laughter and conversation carrying on the wind. For the first time, the weight of the past felt like a distant echo, replaced by the strength of their love and the promise of the future. As Claire looked at her sons, their faces lit by the glow of the street lamps, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Their journey had been long and fraught with pain, but they had found their way back to each other. And in that moment, she knew they would face whatever came next together, with hope, resilience, and an unbreakable bond. It was a new beginning, and for Claire, it was everything she had ever dreamed of. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.